A battered girl sits helplessly on the ground as a mustached man sneers that she is finally free, mockingly hoping Fluffy is happy. Looking utterly desolate, Furifure listens to the cruel announcement that the former saint is hereby exiled from the kingdom. Reflecting on her past, she reveals that she was once revered as the saint of the Harvest Kingdom. She explains that a saint possesses holy power, offering prayers that transform barren lands into fertile gardens and clear away rotting rains. Carrying abundant baskets of food, the joyful citizens prove that a saint is a crucial person upon whom the entire country depends. However, Furifure's tragic downfall began the moment she lost her holy power. Raised in an orphanage that was torn down when she was 3, she watched everyone else get exiled abroad while she remained behind. Because of her rare abilities, she was taken to the royal palace but was forced to live a harsh life imprisoned in an underground cell. Struggling to survive on just one meal a day, she found it incredibly difficult to keep her strength up due to severe malnutrition. Miraculously, the young girl smiled brightly as she somehow managed to make up for the severe lack of nutrition. Kneeling in the dirt, she secretly grew fresh vegetables right on the exposed ground of her underground prison. Unfortunately, her hidden source of hope was violently discovered by a furious guard. Clutching her precious harvest to her chest, she trembled as the Jarlpal underlings stood over her. A heavy boot viciously stomped her vegetables into the dirt, ignoring her desperate cries as the guard accused her of using holy power for selfish purposes. The mustached man furiously scolded her, declaring that if she had time to pretend to be a farmer, she should be using her power for the good of the country. Forbidden from ever growing vegetables again, she silently prayed and realized she could no longer use her holy powers at all. A cruel guard announced feeding time, casually dropping a rock-hard piece of bread onto the filthy floor. Desperate to survive, she humbly accepted that even this miserable scrap would have to be enough to fill her empty stomach. Suddenly, the heavy metal lock on her cell door clicked open with a sharp clatter. Bursting into the cell, the mustached man violently smacked her across the face with brutal force. Thrown backward by the vicious strike, Furifure screamed in sudden agony. Staring down at her emaciated body, the man scoffed in disgust and called her a dirty sack of skin and bones. Continuing his cruel mockery, he declared she was so useless she wouldn't even hold any value as a prostitute. Calling her ungrateful trash, he berated her for selfishly using her powers instead of repaying the massive debt she owed him for making her a saint. Looming over her trembling form, he sadistically promised that she would finally get the punishment she deserved. Helpless on the cold stone floor, silent tears streamed down Furifure's bruised and battered face. Since her holy power had completely run out, he coldly commanded her to get out of there because she was nothing but trash. When she weakly protested that she couldn't even walk from severe starvation, he smoothly told her not to worry. Gesturing toward a waiting vehicle outside the gates, he mockingly offered to take her away in his carriage. He taunted that if she wandered aimlessly, she might eventually run into the same orphanage scum she grew up with. Trying to reject his cruel remarks, she hoped for at least a brief moment of peace to sunbathe. Meanwhile, it was revealed that besides Furifure, there were already many other recognized saints existing among the nobles. Sensing only a tiny fraction of power from them, she quietly wondered if those noble saints were also imprisoned just like she was. In her mind, elegant noble girls laughed haughtily, loudly questioning if a lowly saint like her had no shame standing among them. An armored knight coldly ordered her into the carriage, ending the story as a girl sarcastically promised her the sweetest son's blessings from now on. Huddled miserably inside the moving carriage, she listened to the loud, angry jeers echoing from the unseen crowds outside. The mustached man demanded she listen to the angry voices of the people telling her exactly how useless she was. Glancing out the window, she heard citizens shouting in outrage that their taxes were wasted on a woman who looked like a skeleton. The furious mob screamed for her to get out of the Harvest Kingdom and never come back, sealing her tragic exile. Overwhelmed by absolute despair, a single tear fell as she realized all her pain and suffering had been completely in vain. Covering her mouth in nausea, she felt like throwing up, prompting the man to sneer and mockingly ask if the pale saint had been drinking. Calling her a tax thief who needed to pay, he suddenly stopped the carriage, throwing her forward with a violent lurch. Kicking the door open, he brutally gripped her hair and warned her she would be dead if she vomited inside his carriage. Tossed onto the harsh dirt path, she lay battered as the coachman cheerfully announced they would go no further and sarcastically wished her the best. Left completely abandoned on the desolate road, Furifure quietly bid goodbye to her ruined life. Watching the carriage disappear into the distance, she desperately wished for just one more chance to see someone dear to her. Tears escaping her closed eyes, she fondly remembered a kind boy from the orphanage who had always been like a brother to her. Deep in her shattered heart, all she ever truly wanted was to meet someone with a warm and caring soul. Suddenly, a strange sliding and thudding sound broke through her despair, making her wonder if someone was there. Weakly opening her eyes to a gentle tap and a sudden click, she murmured in confusion at the unexpected noises interrupting her solitude. Fewer stirs from her sleep, confused as she feels something strange poking and touching her arm. Her eye flies open in sudden, terrified alarm. Thrashing wildly on the bed, she shrieks in agony that the needle hurts. A calm voice tells the panicked girl to rest easy, promising that she will be completely fine soon. A bespectacled man drawing her blood introduces himself as the royal physician of Riverside, sent by His Majesty the King. Noting her energetic protests and cute face, the doctor cheerfully concludes she must be fine while she stammers in utter confusion. Stepping out to report to His Majesty, he gently advises her to rest a while longer just to be completely safe. Sitting up in the unfamiliar bed, she repeats the words Riverside Kingdom and His Majesty in sheer disbelief. She remembers nearly dying in the wilderness after losing consciousness from her brutal exile from the Harvest Kingdom. Startled by a sudden touch, she looks down in quiet surprise. She cautiously examines the incredibly soft fabric surrounding her. Tumbling and spinning in pure joy, she happily embraces the fluffy pillows and revels in how incredibly good it all feels. A warm voice interrupts her playtime, playfully noting that it looks like she is finally awake. A handsome young man with golden hair steps into the room and gently asks how she is feeling. Blushing slightly at the handsome stranger, she listens as he explains they found her collapsed in the wilderness and that she had been sleeping for days. Eagerly changing the subject, she excitedly praises how incredibly fluffy and comfortable her new surroundings are. Laughing warmly, he clarifies he was actually asking about her health, prompting her to happily declare her nausea is completely gone. Remembering the physician's warning about her speech, she nervously asks if this golden-haired man is the person who helped her. Her eyes widen in absolute shock as he casually introduces himself as His Majesty, King Forced of Riverside Kingdom. Fura immediately drops to her knees to apologize for her rudeness, but the new king humbly tells her not to worry since everyone helps him anyway. Changing the topic, King Forced curiously asks why she was lying completely abandoned in the middle of the wilderness. Staring up at his gentle face, she silently wonders if she can truly trust this seemingly good person. Terrified of letting her past slip since they might still be close to the Harvest Kingdom, she hesitates to reveal the truth. Sensing her discomfort, Forced kindly tells her she doesn't have to answer, asking instead if she is simply hungry. A massive, undeniable rumble echoes from her empty stomach, answering the king's question instantly. Blushing deeply in embarrassment, she asks if it is okay to have a meal, and Forced laughs while officially inviting her to dinner. Smiling warmly, the king tells her to come with him and leads the way down the hall. Overwhelmed by his generosity, she quietly thanks him, genuinely touched by his unwavering kindness. A magnificent feast is beautifully arranged on the dining table, featuring bread, fresh salads, and large warm dishes. Staring at the massive spread with sparkling eyes, she breathlessly asks if it is really all right for her to eat all of this. Forced tells her to eat as much as she wants, while she realizes even a small plate here equals several days of her former prison rations. Explaining that the doctor warned him she was malnourished, the king points out the boiled egg yolk among the gentle foods prepared specifically for her. Plucking a piece of broccoli with his fingers, Forced tells her to simply eat and to not worry about thanking him for his care. Stuffing her cheeks, Fura sparkles with pure delight and declares she has never eaten anything this incredibly delicious. As the king asks how she is enjoying the food, he watches her happily munching away with her bare hands. He playfully demonstrates how to eat freely, enthusiastically slamming the food into his own mouth to make her feel comfortable. He gently warns her that the hot porridge would burn her hands, while she admits she prefers grabbing the vegetables directly. Moving closer, the handsome king warmly holds her hand to carefully guide her with the utensils. Fura stares down silently, entirely overwhelmed by the unexpected tenderness. Filled with quiet confusion, she genuinely cannot understand how His Majesty could be so incredibly kind to her. Answering her unspoken doubt, Forced firmly states that he will always help anyone who is in trouble. She thanks him gratefully while staring at her empty plate, happily remarking that she just ate enough for 3 entire days. Smiling brightly, King Forced happily promises that the royal cooks will prepare plenty of food for her tomorrow as well. Gazing at her with gentle eyes, the king insists she rest safely in the palace until her strength fully recovers. Completely moved by his warm hospitality, Furifur loudly and tearfully thanks him so much. Forced smiles affectionately, assuring the crying girl that this way she will definitely get well soon. Sitting quietly at the grand table, she wipes her tears while the king gently pats her head. Heavy rain pours violently outside the towering stone walls of the safe, secure palace. Snuggled happily back into the incredibly fluffy pillows, the young girl sighs that this warm bed feels just like a dream. Sitting quietly beside her, His Majesty King Forced watches over her while she wonders exactly what kind of person he truly is. Reflecting on the king's personal etiquette lesson earlier that day, a young girl realizes she must properly learn how to use a fork, knife, and spoon. A girl named Miri cheerfully greets her uncle in a grand hallway. Boasting about finally disposing of the useless orphan saint girl, Miri declares her intent to showcase her own true saintly power to the entire country. With a playful smile, Miri slyly asks her uncle to raise the saint's compensation. As rain patters against the window, Miri argues that increasing the saint's pay will boost motivation and bring even more prosperity to the country. Looking out over the wet castle grounds, the uncle remarks that while rain is incredibly rare here, such unusual things do happen occasionally. Meanwhile, Lady Furifur groggily begins to wake up in a comfortable bed as someone gently calls her name. Rubbing the sleep from her eyes, Furifur is greeted by a smiling young woman wishing her a good morning. The woman introduces herself as Aqua, a maid assigned to take care of her personal needs, leaving Furifur thoroughly charmed by her cuteness. Guiding her young charge, Aqua provides a pair of slippers and politely asks Lady Furifur to step this way. Aqua presents a massive, bubbling bathhouse, remarking that being clean is a truly wonderful feeling. Marveling at the tub, Furifur mistakenly assumes she can wash her clothes and body at the same time, prompting a flustered Aqua to ask her to strip first. While Furifur continues to express her sheer amazement at the facilities, Aqua gently asks if this is her first time in such a luxurious place. Smiling warmly, Aqua tells Furifur to drop the honorific language, explaining that as her caretaker, such formalities aren't necessary. Aqua tenderly dries the young girl's hair with a towel, urging her to simply relax and stop worrying about strict etiquette. Gratefully wrapping herself in the towel, Furifur thanks Ms. Aqua and promises to try her best to speak more casually. Furifur dives into the fluffy bubbles, thoroughly enjoying the incredibly nice and luxurious bath experience. Now wearing an adorable, frilly new outfit, Furifur excitedly thanks the maid as Aqua compliments how perfectly the dress suits her. Aqua then guides her to a sprawling, opulent living space, inviting her to relax and spend some time in the luxurious room. Sinking into a soft, fluffy couch, a deeply thankful Furifur resolves to find a way to give back to the wonderful people of this kingdom. Staring quietly, she wonders to herself if her supposedly unusable saint power will ever manage to recover. Suddenly struck by an idea, Furifur jumps up from the couch and excitedly calls out for Aqua. Gripping the maid's hands with bright enthusiasm, Furifur eagerly asks for some vegetable seeds or leaves. A slightly sweating Aqua agrees, completely taken aback when Furifur passionately declares that she wants to do farm work. After a moment of thought, Aqua suggests there are a few ways to manage this and offers the use of the garden directly behind the palace. Agreeing that it is important to stay close to nature, Aqua promises to formally inform His Majesty of the unusual request. Looking bewildered, Aqua asks if Furifur actually knows how to farm, pointing out that vegetables certainly do not grow from just planting leaves. Furifur innocently explains that she grew vegetables from leaves back in her dungeon cell, wondering aloud if plants simply grow differently depending on the soil. Their conversation stalls as they both look out the window, observing the heavy, relentless rain pouring down. Hoping to clear the weather, Furifur decides to try offering a heartfelt prayer, even if it might not actually work. Clasping her hands tightly, she earnestly begs the sun to be friendly and shine down upon the Riverside kingdom. A frantic Aqua gently shakes the groggy girl out of her deep prayerful trance, urging Lady Furifur to wake up. Pointing eagerly toward the window, Aqua excitedly urges Furifur to look outside because the heavy rain has miraculously stopped. Confirming the miraculous weather shift, a beaming Aqua explains just how incredibly rare it is for the rain to suddenly stop in the Riverside kingdom. Staring out at the clearing skies, Furifure silently wonders if this was merely a coincidence or if her holy saint power truly did disappear. Returning with good news, Aqua confirms that His Majesty approved their gardening request and gently observes that Furifure is also fond of praying. Surprised to hear that King Forced also prays, Furifure listens as Aqua explains that a past mentor of His Majesty enjoyed praying. Taking in this new information, Furifure realizes that the king must be fervently praying for the entire country to prosper. Stepping outside into the fresh air, an awestruck Furifure stretches her arms wide at the sight of the vast, spacious garden. Spinning with bold enthusiasm, the young girl suddenly trips and smashes face-first into the muddy soil while a horrified Aqua screams. Completely undeterred by her muddy face, Furifure jumps right back to her feet and pumps herself up to work now that the sun is out. Singing cheerfully as she sprinkles leaves into the dirt, Furifure brushes off a deadpan Aqua's reminder that planting mere foliage yields no crops. Sighing in defeat, Aqua decides to let the girl have her fun, rationalizing that the rotting leaves will at least provide the soil with some nutrients. Clasping her muddy hands together, Furifure earnestly prays for the farm to grow delicious and nutritious vegetables. Beaming with joy over finding such wonderful soil, Furifure enthusiastically thanks her maid while Aqua asks if she enjoyed her time outside. Sheepishly apologizing for getting completely covered in mud again, Furifure listens as Aqua calmly suggests they head inside for another bath and a change of clothes. Night eventually falls over the grand castle, casting a serene glow beneath the bright light of a full moon. Standing formally before a distinguished man seated at a large desk, Aqua concludes her report on the day's highly unusual gardening activities. The man strokes his chin in deep thought, marveling at the truly mysterious girl whose desire to visit the garden coincided perfectly with the sudden cessation of the rain. Considering that the relentless rain has left them severely short-staffed anyway, he decides he doesn't mind letting her use the palace garden for a while. Startled by a sudden realization, a wide-eyed Aqua gasps and immediately calls out to His Majesty. Staring intently at the handsome ruler, Aqua directly questions if he intends to keep his newly favored Lady Furifure as physically close to him as possible. A highly flustered king stammers and immediately denies the accusation, leaving a confused Aqua to wonder what his true intentions are. Leaning in closer, Aqua boldly questions why the benevolent king of Riverside Kingdom would show such blatant favoritism to one specific woman unless he had secretly fallen in love. The stunned king can only let out a breathless gasp of shock as Aqua's romantic accusation catches him completely off guard. Turning her gaze away, Aqua acknowledges His Majesty's inherent kindness but grimly reminds him that their country is currently suffering from a severe food shortage. She warns the king that if the starving populace discovers a foreign girl is receiving luxurious royal favor, dangerous voices of political discontent will inevitably rise. Defending his controversial actions, the king insists that he initially only intended to provide the mysterious girl with a basic, limited extent of medical treatment. Recalling their fateful journey back to Riverside, the king reveals that he recognized something inexplicably familiar in the unconscious, battered girl's face. Aqua suspects he is using Furifure as a mere substitute for someone he is desperately searching for, which the king strongly denies despite admitting the girl's uncanny resemblance. The king passionately clarifies that his special treatment of Furifure is actually driven by a deep desire to repay the immense kindness he received from the kingdom's people while being raised there. He reflects on the heavy, complicated burden of being crowned king despite not originally being born within the borders of this country. Remembering Furifure's fragile, tragic state, the king softly confesses that discovering her out in the rain felt entirely like an act of undeniable fate. Smiling with cheeky confidence, Aqua easily dismisses his profound philosophical reasoning and points out that his overwhelming devotion is clearly just romantic love. Deep in contemplative thought, the king vividly remembers holding the unconscious girl in his arms, feeling a powerful, fated compulsion that he absolutely must save her life. Chuckling softly at the situation, Aqua playfully yields the argument, teasingly noting that the king's grand and noble power is currently being used to save just one single girl. A thankful king clears his throat and formally asks Aqua to prepare the necessary expenses, as she warmly reminds him that the kingdom's people place great trust in his leadership. Her expression instantly shifting to one of grave concern, Aqua admits there is one dark, unsettling matter that has been deeply bothering her. Shocking the king to his core, Aqua reveals her horrific suspicion that Lady Furifure was being subjected to severe physical abuse before they found her. Aqua explains that while helping the girl bathe that very morning, she was horrified to discover numerous dark bruises scattered across Fura's battered body. The loyal mate confesses that the disturbing image of those bruises is a heavy burden she has been obsessively thinking about again and again all day long. The king's face falls into a dark, sorrowful grimace as he painfully recalls the girl's profoundly broken and injured state when they first rescued her. Just as Aqua suggests that Fura's lingering trauma makes her hesitate to trust them or ask for help, a sudden, loud clatter violently interrupts their serious conversation. A frantic servant bursts through the doors, breathlessly begging His Majesty to come at once to witness something truly incredible outside. Out in the dark royal garden, an impossibly massive, sparkling harvest of giant cabbages and plump tomatoes flourishes under the ethereal moonlight. Staring out into the lush darkness, both the king and Aqua are rendered completely speechless by the impossible agricultural miracle standing right before their eyes. Dropping to one knee among the flourishing foliage, the bewildered king touches a massive tomato vine and struggles to comprehend how this garden could possibly exist. Looking up at his trusted maid with a stunned realization, the king finally pieces together the divine truth behind the sudden, miraculous harvest. He solemnly concludes that Lady Fura is undeniably a true saint, a holy woman blessed with genuine, miraculous power. The following morning, a bright and cheerful Fura happily yawns and greets the king while casually munching on a piece of food. A slightly exasperated servant gently scolds the young girl, politely asking her to please finish chewing her food before she attempts to speak. The king smiles warmly at his cheerful guest, gratefully noting that she appears to be feeling much better thanks to the palace's hospitality. Placing a heavy, clinking sack of coins onto the table, the king surprises a confused Fura by announcing he has a significant favor to ask of her. Shocking the young girl, the king formally declares his intention to purchase the miraculous vegetables she grew the previous day using the sack of royal funds. He explains that the Riverside Kingdom's relentless rain makes crop cultivation incredibly difficult, forcing them to trade for high-priced food from the nearby Harvest Kingdom. Despite the kingdom's harsh agricultural conditions, the king marvels at how Fura effortlessly managed to grow such excellent vegetables in just a single day. Thrilled by his praise, Fura reveals she only grows vegetables as a hobby to survive the rain, deeply delighting the king with the prospect of keeping this wonderful production going. Seizing the incredible opportunity, the king formally invites Fura to stay at the palace permanently if she wishes to continue expanding her miraculous farm in the royal gardens. Fura's eyes sparkle with sheer amazement, and she excitedly confesses that she was just about to ask for that exact same gardening permission. When the generous king offers the entire sack of gold as payment, a bashful Fura shocks him by asking for only one single gold coin in exchange for her crops. She generously insists that the single coin will serve as full payment for everything she has already grown, as well as everything she will continue to grow from now on. A completely baffled king protests that one coin is far too cheap a price for her magical labor, but Fura humbly reminds him that farming is simply her beloved hobby. Clasping her hands in sheer awe, she happily explains she only wants the single, beautifully crafted gold coin to use as a shiny decoration for her new room. The confused king agrees to her bizarre financial terms but asks what she plans to do with the remaining half of her massive vegetable harvest. Bursting with agricultural enthusiasm, Fura excitedly explains her plan to tear off the leaves from the remaining crops and replant them to rapidly grow even more food. Fura passionately rambles about her highly specific scientific process of washing, rooting, and replanting vegetable leaves in the wet soil to drastically maximize crop yields. The king watches her rapid-fire farming lecture with a tender, deeply affectionate smile, completely captivated by the young girl's pure and innocent joy. Suddenly realizing she has been rambling enthusiastically, a flustered Fura apologizes for saying strange things, but the king warmly reassures her that he loves seeing her genuine passion for growing vegetables. Fura playfully points out that the king's face has turned bright red and teasingly asks if he is angry, which immediately sends him into a highly flustered panic of denial. The chapter closes with a simple, heartfelt message of profound gratitude for the incredible kindness and miraculous bounty that have graced the kingdom. A speaker is thanked because their actions will improve domestic food distribution and ultimately save the kingdom of Riverside's food supply. Deeply moved, Fura states this is the first time her life has been saved, allowing her to finally do what she enjoys most, farming. Blushing with a warm smile, she promises to gradually repay her savior little by little from now on. While out exploring the gardens, Fura excitedly discovers a wriggling worm. Her dark-haired companion panics at the sight, but Furifur happily explains that the harmless little creatures till the soil for them. Aqua spots a buzzing ladybug while the dark-haired girl strictly warns Furifur to stop touching the worms. Furifur kneels in the dirt to pray for the plants to grow into healthy vegetables, silently noting that using her holy power doesn't make her tired at all anymore. She wonders if this newfound ease is because her holy power has disappeared, recalling how even a little praying used to drain her strength entirely. The dark-haired girl notices Furifur looking troubled and asks if something is wrong with her goals. Furifur explains she had hoped the plants would grow fast to surprise everyone, but she feels her efforts aren't going very well. The dark-haired girl excitedly reveals a basket of vegetables, announcing that the crops Furifur planted that morning were already ready for a wonderful harvest by evening. Shocked by the incredible growth speed, Furifur marvels at how mysterious the Riverside kingdom is. Indoors, Furifur admires a pile of gold coins, prompting the dark-haired girl to exasperatedly remind her that currency is not for decoration. Changing the subject, the dark-haired girl reminds Furifur that she was scheduled to learn how to read and write today. She chuckles and reveals that they have brought in a special instructor specifically for her lessons. Furifur and Aqua are completely stunned when His Majesty himself enters the room to teach the alphabet. Meanwhile, the dark-haired girl smugly offers Aqua one of the newly harvested vegetables to eat, boasting about the hard work from yesterday. Aqua takes a bite and realizes it is one of the sweet vegetables that Lady Furifur grew. She is amazed by the flavorful taste and immediately feels her tiredness melting away from a sudden surge of energy. The king notes that he felt the exact same way, explaining that Furifur's vegetables possess incredible energy-healing properties. The dark-haired girl looks down with a somber expression, wondering why Furifur didn't use this power back then. The king solemnly clarifies that her recovery effect simply wasn't enough at the time. Returning to the matter of lessons, the dark-haired girl mentions that Lady Furifur asked to be taught reading and writing. The king asks about Furifur's schedule for tomorrow, deciding he would like to ask her about it himself. The dark-haired girl stares at him skeptically and points out that His Majesty is very busy, offering to take care of the lessons instead. Gripping his fist with absolute determination, the king loudly declares that he will finish all of tomorrow's work right now. He then drops a massive stack of paperwork onto the desk, revealing he had already planned for this and made some progress. Sighing at his antics, the dark-haired girl admits she feels great today because of the vegetables, predicting he will be finished soon. Humming happily, she agrees to help the king with his paperwork so they can get started on the lessons immediately. Sweating slightly, Furifur nervously agrees to begin the lessons at once. Her heart begins to throb wildly as the king leans in dangerously close to look at the study materials with her. Flustered by her racing heart, Furifur mentally scolds herself to focus and take the lessons seriously since he is taking the time to teach her. The king directs her attention to the alphabet chart on the paper, preparing to study the letters. He explains that this specific chart is exactly how he first learned his letters. Patiently, he points to the chart and begins identifying individual letters like I and A. Furifur beams with excitement, realizing she already knows some of the letters and will soon be able to read books. When she claims to remember all of them thanks to his easy-to-understand method, the king gently reminds her there is no need to rush since she has only studied them once. Chuckling warmly, he decides to test her knowledge with a little quiz. He points to various characters, and Furifur excitedly and accurately identifies them as G-I, S-A, and R-A. He continues to point out different letters on the chart, asking her what each subsequent one is. The king is genuinely amazed when Furifur gets all the answers correct, to which she enthusiastically thanks him. She proudly credits her amazing memory to his excellent, quick teaching, thrilled that she learned it all after just one reading. Suddenly anxious, she shrinks back and asks if she will be punished if she fails to memorize things quickly. The king is caught completely off guard, asking her to repeat what she just said about needing to remember all the royal lessons to avoid punishment. His expression darkens with deep concern as he asks if she has been hurt or punished many times before. Furifur is bewildered, internally panicking because she genuinely thought harsh punishment was a normal part of learning. Desperate to cover her slip-up, she nervously stammers out excuses, suggesting minor punishments like skipping dessert or only eating rice. Seeing right through her distress, the king gently reaches his hand out toward her across the table. He gives her hand a reassuring squeeze, fiercely demanding to know who on earth has been doing terrible things to punish her. Furifur looks away tearfully, terrified that her relationship with the king will worsen if she reveals the truth about her past. The king tells Furifura it's okay to fail and not do tasks perfectly the first time, adding she doesn't have to talk if she doesn't want to. He explains that everyone makes mistakes while learning and gently points out that she wasn't harshly scolded for every failure before. A single teardrop falls from Furifura's wide eye as she softly questions if that's really true. The king assures her that he won't punish her for failing, especially if it only happens once or twice. He reaches out and gently strokes her hair, acknowledging that she has had an incredibly tough time until now. Breaking down in tears, Furifura leans into his touch and finally admits just how hard her past truly was. The king solemnly accepts her tearful confession with a soft note of understanding. Recalling the cold dungeon bars, Furifura realizes she no longer has to live in constant fear. She reflects on the profound truth that he saved her. Sometime later, someone announces a special occasion, urging everyone to dress up as much as possible outside the towering palace. Aqua helps Furifura into a beautiful dress, though Furifura feels strange wearing such elegant clothes. Hearing chatter from downstairs, Furifura decides it's time to go and pushes open the heavy doors. Aqua calls out to Lady Furifura as she steps through the doorway adorned in flowing white fabric. Furifura gasps in surprise when an imposing figure suddenly apologizes for calling her out without warning. She is stunned to hear that there is a reward waiting for her, noting that King Forst looks exceptionally regal today. The king proudly announces that the kingdom's people became healthier after eating the vegetables she cultivated, thanking her with a formal reward. Furifura is confused since she was just having fun gardening, but the king suspects her vegetables possess some kind of special power. Standing before the Grand Thrones, he officially commends her for her incredible contributions. He deeply thanks her for doing her utmost to save and bring prosperity to the people of the Riverside Kingdom. Opening a small jewelry box, he offers an additional gift on top of her reward money and expresses his anticipation for her future achievements. Furifura is mesmerized by the shining royal medal, especially when she excitedly notices her own name engraved on it. The king explains that presenting this royal palace medal will allow her to be recognized and use various facilities entirely for free. He specifically highlights that the kingdom's hot spring facilities are included in this perk. Furifura's eyes sparkle with amazement upon hearing about the uniquely charming grand bath onsen. Clinking her new medal, Furifura happily walks with Aqua, eager to head straight to the hot spring facilities. Aqua strictly reminds her to be quiet and avoid rowdiness in the royal baths, to which Furifura enthusiastically agrees before inviting Aqua to join her. Suddenly, a loud rumble shakes the ground as a massive horse approaches far too closely. Furifura happily greets the horse while Aqua nervously suggests they get into the carriage. Furifura playfully asks the horse to take good care of them during the ride. The horse affectionately nuzzles against her face, tickling Furifura and making her giggle uncontrollably. Aqua scolds her for being reckless, utterly bewildered by the strange face the animal is making. Furifura explains that she senses the horse just likes to be petted before working, leaving Aqua amazed by her noble quality of attracting animals. Safely seated inside the carriage, Furifura hums a cheerful tune in high spirits. However, upon arriving at the empty bathhouse, she sighs in profound disappointment. Pouting slightly, she notes that the public spa isn't nearly as crowded and lively as she had hoped it would be. Aqua looks around the empty courtyard and agrees that there are far fewer people than usual since her last visit. While Furifura assumes people either can't afford it or simply dislike baths, Aqua highly doubts that is the case. Aqua explains that the Riverside Kingdom citizens have been working non-stop in heavy, continuous rain, making a restful bath impossible. Looking up at the gloomy sky, Furifura softly wonders what they can do to make things easier for everyone. Aqua points out that while the royal farm delivers Furifura's vegetables, it still isn't enough to feed the entire population experiencing food shortages. Furifura resolves to help the other farms tomorrow, but Aqua firmly warns against assisting them without compensation again. Aqua passionately argues that doing free work devalues labor and creates trouble, insisting that Furifura's admirable goodwill must be met with some form of pay to avoid complications. Realizing the wisdom in her words, Furifura agrees to let Aqua handle all the negotiations regarding compensation. Meanwhile, under a torrential downpour, someone reports that the Harvest Kingdom's crops are rotting due to the endless rain. A frustrated king scolds a young holy maiden named Miri, blaming the disastrous weather on the other maidens failing to do their jobs despite her daily prayers. Watching workers dig up the courtyard, the king arrogantly boasts that getting rid of the cursed woman's power from the dungeon soil finally made the palace feel refreshing again. However, both he and Miri sigh miserably, complaining about their lack of energy and how awful it feels to no longer eat fresh-grown, energizing vegetables. Suddenly, a brilliant idea strikes the king. He asks Miri if she can secretly use her holy power to clear the sky exclusively over the palace garden. Selfishly prioritizing his own comfort, he declares they must grow the energizing vegetables just for him so he can handle government affairs without worry. Questioning the ethics of the situation, a young girl with twin tails asks if their actions are illegal, only to be assured it is not an issue. A bearded royal grins confidently, claiming that if his niece Miri's energy revitalizes the country, no one will complain because high-ranking royals must always maintain good health. Miri laughs brightly in agreement, praising her clever uncle for his undeniable logic. Heavy rainfall pours down over a lush field, violently rustling the large green leaves. The group decides to tour the Riverside Kingdom's farms, starting their journey with the one closest to the royal palace. Standing outdoors, a tense young girl waits nervously while her dark-haired companion remains perfectly calm. A smiling older woman warmly welcomes the adorable girls who have come to visit her farm. The young blonde girl nervously stammers a polite greeting to the farm worker. Stepping forward, the dark-haired girl introduces herself as Aqua, Lady Furifur's maid, and thanks the woman for meeting them. Seeking confirmation, Furifur asks if Mikasha is the one who grew the royal palace's vegetables. Chuckling mysteriously, Mikasha notes that Furifur possesses a truly exceptional power she has never witnessed before. Eagerly agreeing to get started, Furifur accepts the invitation to take a look at the field. Shocking her companions, Furifur dives completely flat onto the dirt to intensely focus her energy. A gentle voice advises the nervous girl to simply relax and be herself without stressing over the task. Concentrating deeply, Furifur prays for the soil to become a rich haven where plants and insects can thrive healthily and produce nutritious vegetables. Carrying a tea set, Mikasha praises Furifur's good work and invites her over to sit down. Pouring tea, Mikasha expresses deep satisfaction because Furifur demonstrated far more power than she ever imagined. Staring intensely, Mikasha formally declares that Furifur possesses an incredible power. Mikasha insists that Furifur must be aware of her own abilities as a saint, just as Aqua previously mentioned. Taken completely by surprise, the wide-eyed girl demands to know how Mikasha discovered she is a saint. Mikasha simply closes her eyes and smiles knowingly at the sudden revelation. Admitting that her own power faded a long time ago, Mikasha prompts a shocked Furifur to ask if she was also a saint. Bowing her head slightly, Aqua sincerely apologizes to Lady Furifur for all the trouble caused up until now. Aqua explains that she and His Majesty realized Furifur was secretly a saint, though they struggled with how to inform her. Seeking proper guidance, they arranged this meeting so the former saint, Lady Mirasha, could offer senior advice to Furifur. Looking downcast, Furifur admits she might have been a saint before but feels like a pseudo-saint now because she never feels like she is using her powers. Smiling warmly, Mirasha commands the magnificent but completely unaware saint to look behind her. Furifur turns her head in absolute shock as hundreds of tiny sprouts suddenly burst forth from the previously barren dirt. Clenching her fist, Furifur realizes with absolute astonishment that she does not feel tired at all. Mirasha explains that easily blessing the weather, plants, and nature without any fatigue proves Furifur's power is entirely beyond normal limits. Taking a sip of tea, Mirasha admits that performing such a miracle even in her prime would have left her completely exhausted. Gazing at the bewildered girl, Mirasha notes that utilizing this tremendous level of power probably just feels like taking a casual walk to Furifur. Furifur chuckles nervously, wondering why she possesses so much power and reflecting on her past in the Harvest Kingdom. Mirasha kindly explains that eating well and living a healthy lifestyle naturally allows her body and holy power to reach their absolute full potential. Sweating slightly, Aqua admits the display is beyond amazing and she finally understands the true scale of Miss Furifur's power. Panic sets in as Furifur realizes that if others discover she is a saint, she will be forced to work constantly and lose her freedom to play in the mud. Noticing her sadness, Aqua asks what is wrong, prompting Furifur to confess her desire to play in the mud instead of overworking despite being a saint. Aqua immediately reassures her that such a simple lifestyle is perfectly fine, leaving Furifur thoroughly confused. Aqua confidently declares that if Lady Furifur uses her power, the kingdom of Riverside will transform into a peaceful and prosperous nation. Encouraging her mistress, Aqua insists that serving as a saint does not mean she has to give up doing the things she genuinely enjoys. With a dark, protective glare, Aqua swears that neither she nor His Highness will remain silent if anyone tries to force Furifure into cruel or excessive labor. Aqua internally notes that a saint is a precious national treasure, making it inherently wrong to force such a person to work recklessly. Hearing this fierce declaration of loyalty, Mirasha simply closes her eyes and smiles warmly at the pair. Later that night, a brilliant full moon illuminates the towering architecture of the grand royal palace. Furifure sits quietly at a long dining table alongside Aqua and a handsome young royal. The young man sincerely apologizes to Lady Furifure for staying quiet even after realizing she was a saint. Looking down, Furifure also apologizes for keeping her own suspicions about still being a saint a total secret. The young man admits he chose not to tell her because he feared she might put up defenses, believing silence would help her stay calm. Changing the subject with a bright smile, he announces that since her holy power is officially confirmed, he would like to significantly increase her reward. Slumping over with a weary but contented sigh, Furifure silently laments that she has nowhere left to put all these gold coins. King Forced confidently offers to grant one special wish to Furifure on top of her usual gold coin reward. Blushing brightly, Furifure humbly admits that simply staying at the farm and playing in the mud already feels like an incredible reward. Striking an inspired idea, she eagerly asks if King Forced would be willing to give her just one day of his precious time. Beaming with innocent excitement, she proposes a shared reward experience that both of them can actively enjoy together. Aqua smiles warmly at the wonderful suggestion while Furifure hums a happy tune, leaving the bewildered king to process the energetic request. Remembering her frail body and torn clothes, King Forced privately marvels at her current healthy enthusiasm as she excitedly suggests they go out together. Watching her happily munch on snacks, he admires her adorable innocence but worries she might be a bit too pure for her own good. Staring out a large window, Forced recalls his utter shock at discovering her collapsed by the roadside during his return trip from the Harvest Kingdom. Smiling softly, he realizes that her earnest vulnerability and lack of pretense are significant parts of her undeniable charm. Forced chuckles at the absurdity of a royal request involving mud, deeply appreciating that she seeks simple joy rather than lofty ambition or honor. Intrigued by her unique mindset, the young king resolves to understand exactly what goes through her fascinatingly pure head. Standing nervously before a massive bathhouse, Forced questions their destination despite his previous promise to accompany her absolutely anywhere. Furifure excitedly reveals she had Aqua arrange to rent out the entire bathhouse just so the two of them could enjoy complete privacy. Flustered, Forced questions his own involvement as Furifure cheerfully urges him to dive into the warm water immediately. Panic fully sets in as Forced realizes they are standing in the women's changing area and she seemingly expects them to bathe together. Forced leaps back in pure shock as Furifure innocently begins disrobing, completely misunderstanding his modesty since they rented the whole building. Heart pounding wildly, a blushing Forced frantically covers his eyes and begs her to stop, terrified that he is actively being seduced. He frantically stammers that stripping is an inappropriate display of gratitude, but she happily insists she is just showing her immense thanks for her new life. Tilting her head in genuine confusion, Furifure questions his intense embarrassment and equates wearing clothes solely with staying warm. Suddenly slipping on her discarded garments, Furifure falls forward and forces a panicked Forced to lunge out and catch her. The king successfully braces his stance, catching the breathless young girl firmly against his chest with a sharp gasp. Holding the completely naked girl close to his own body, Forced freezes in an overwhelmingly flustered and awkward state. Regaining a shred of kingly composure, Forced firmly tells the young saint that she desperately needs to learn a crucial lesson in propriety. Realizing her monumental blunder, a deeply embarrassed Furifure steps back and apologizes with her eyes squeezed tightly shut. Forced strictly instructs her to never expose herself to men even in underwear, prompting a highly sheepish agreement from the blushing girl. Covering his flushed face with his hand, Forced groans that she still fails to grasp the sheer impropriety of inviting him into the actual bathwater. Later in the steamy bath, Furifure chatters happily as she scrubs soapy lather deeply into the exasperated king's hair. Relaxing slightly under her gentle hands, Forced murmurs that the soothing sensation reminds him of being tenderly cared for a long time ago. Catching himself getting far too sentimental, Forced quickly dismisses the nostalgic thought while Furifure tilts her head curiously. Sinking into the warm water, the king exhales deeply and reflects on just how incredibly long it has been since he truly relaxed. Noticing his peaceful expression, Furifur gleefully points out his relaxed state, which he calmly and coolly acknowledges. Showing genuine vulnerability, Forced thanks Furifur for providing this much-needed peace, completely flustering the modest saint in return. As they soak in the soothing steam, Furifur lazily requests to stay in the comforting warm bath just a little bit longer. A few silent moments later, Forced lets out a heavy sigh and attempts to call out to his unusually quiet bathing companion. Forced recoils in shock as Furifur's head droops dangerously close to the bathwater, deeply asleep from the overwhelming heat. Splashing swiftly over to her side, he grabs her bare shoulders and frantically shakes the dozing saint to wake her up. Recalling Aqua's previous strict warning, Forced realizes that waking the deeply unconscious girl before she overheats is going to be a nightmare. Blushing profusely with a pounding heart, the young king wraps the deeply sleeping girl in a towel and hoists her out of the tub. After carefully laying Furifur on a nearby couch, Forced adjusts his own clothes and exhales a massive sigh of profound relief. Glancing down at her peaceful slumbering form, he spots an old, faded bruise marring her pale skin. Filled with protective sympathy, Forced reflects on the immense, unspoken hardships this strong-willed young girl must have endured before finding safety. Gently stroking her damp hair, the king softly acknowledges her quiet, enduring strength as a survivor. Determined to wake her safely, Forced grips her shoulders and shakes her vigorously until she groans in groggy surprise. Burying his flushed face in his hands, an utterly defeated Forced resigns himself to calling Aqua back into the room for emergency backup. Meanwhile, heavy rain batters a dark estate as a stern voice summons the twin-tailed girl, Miri, for a special assignment. Duke Barbal orders his shocked daughter to relocate to the Riverside kingdom, viewing it as a prime target since it currently lacks a resident saint. Stomping her foot angrily, Miri loudly complains that showing off her powers in a foreign land is completely pointless and a waste of her time. Ignoring her bratty protests, Barbal insists that she must use her holy power to conquer the notoriously harsh conditions of the Riverside kingdom. When Miri stubbornly refuses to travel to a rainy land, her calculating father smoothly threatens to send another saint in her place. Duke Barbal sinisterly reveals his true ambition to eliminate all rival saints, ensuring his daughter becomes the sole pillar of power and brings ultimate glory to his household. A concerned woman notes that the fatigue-recovering vegetables her older brother grew should be fed to the saints. Miri, however, worries if the country will survive in her absence as the burden would be too great for the other saints alone. Observing her uncle working in the field, Miri realizes that the vegetables he grew as a hobby were actually providing them with energy. She firmly concludes that the remaining girls are completely incapable of handling the saints' duties on their own. Suddenly, she covers her mouth in shock as a new, intriguing thought crosses her mind. A sly grin spreads across her face as she realizes this situation might actually be a golden opportunity for her. The scene shifts as an unseen voice announces their imminent arrival at the Riverside Kingdom, addressing Lady Miri. Gazing out from her carriage, Miri casually remarks that the journey was much farther than she had originally anticipated. In a brief flashback to a rain-drenched estate, Miri is heard agreeing to travel to the Riverside Kingdom. A man instructs her to demonstrate the true power of a saint in the Riverside Kingdom before returning to their estate, noting he is counting on her. Miri gleefully imagines the adoration of the masses, confident that if the weather worsens in her absence, everyone will finally realize her supreme importance to the Harvest Kingdom. Plotting her next move, she decides to also showcase her immense power in the Riverside Kingdom to secure an even grander reputation. She scoffs at the thought of her kingdom's other saints being deemed incapable, suddenly remembering that Furifur is supposedly still back in the Harvest Kingdom. Recalling a past conversation, she remembers a man coldly stating that Furifur was dumped in the wilderness and is likely already dead, a fate Miri finds utterly pitiful. Deciding to ask at the capital's checkpoint, Miri suddenly grows confused upon noticing the unexpectedly sunny weather in a kingdom notorious for its storms. Recalling how the farms previously looked like flooded lakes, Miri excitedly decides to use the beautiful weather to tour the agricultural lands. As her carriage approaches the imposing castle walls, she eagerly anticipates seeing just how destitute this kingdom she intends to save truly is. Nearby, the local guards cheerfully converse about the prolonged streak of refreshing, sunny weather they have been enjoying. Overhearing them describe the weather as a miraculous streak, Miri simply nods in quiet acknowledgement as her carriage rolls past. Confident that the good weather won't last with her around, Miri arrogantly declares it's time to inspect the farms, fully expecting to find nothing but damp, rotting soil. Peering out the window, Miri is instantly struck speechless by the startling sight of incredibly lush, thriving crops. Desperately trying to rationalize the impossible, she tries to convince herself that this specific farm must be using exceptionally high-quality fertilizers to grow such healthy vegetables in a rainy land. Sweating with rising panic, she frantically orders her driver to immediately move on to the next farm for further inspection. Stepping out into yet another vibrant field, Miri stares in complete disbelief, demanding to know the meaning behind this widespread agricultural success. Slamming the carriage door shut, she storms off into the fields, loudly declaring that she will find someone to explain this impossible phenomenon. Her mind races in fierce denial, absolutely refusing to accept the possibility that a saint superior to her could possibly exist. Approaching a kneeling farmer, Miri quickly composes herself and casually points out the surprising abundance of his crops. The cheerful farmer denies the presence of a saintess, explaining instead that they have been receiving immense help from someone who grows vegetables at the royal palace. Breathing a massive sigh of relief that there is no rival saintess, Miri curiously asks the farmer to identify this helpful person from the palace. The farmer simply shrugs and snips a vegetable, admitting that he doesn't actually know the mysterious helper's identity. Smiling warmly at the memory, he recalls that the helper was a cute girl whose visible happiness while playing in the dirt made him feel joyful as well. Calling their meeting fate, the farmer offers her a freshly picked tomato, which Miri gladly accepts and immediately bites into. Her eyes widen to comical proportions as the incredible flavor hits her, prompting her to gasp in absolute astonishment. Overwhelmed by the sweet, juicy deliciousness, she feels a profound sense of happiness wash over her, completely blowing away all her travel fatigue. Trembling with culinary ecstasy, Miri declares it the best vegetable she has ever eaten and resolves that she absolutely must bring this to the Harvest Kingdom. Dashing madly back to her carriage, she barks a frantic order to her driver to immediately depart so she can personally inspect every single farm in the capital. As the carriage lurches forward, she gleefully explains that her father and uncle will be delighted by this discovery, ordering the driver to stop instantly if he spots a girl at any farm. The ornate carriage clatters noisily down the dirt path as Miri lets out a breathless chuckle of sheer excitement. Suddenly, Miri presses her face against the glass and shouts for the carriage to halt as she spots a girl lying motionless in a nearby field. Staring in utter disbelief at the prone figure, Miri stammers out her realization that the girl is actually Furifure. Sneaking quietly toward the fence, Miri's mind reels as she struggles to accept the terrifying possibility that those incredible vegetables were grown by Furifure. Observing the peacefully snoring girl, Miri notes that Furifure looks like a completely different person compared to her miserable days back in the Harvest Kingdom. Miri's confusion deepens as she wonders how Furifure could have possibly survived walking across the wilderness to reach the Riverside Kingdom. Suddenly, Furifure jolts awake with a dramatic gasp for food just as a voice calls out that it is almost time for her meal. While Miri smugly assumes Furifure must be enduring a grueling daily life, Furifure instead stretches happily and declares that she was having so much fun. A beautiful, dark-haired maid gently wipes the dirt from Furifure's face as Miri watches the scene unfold with silent, calculating suspicion. The attentive maid politely instructs Furifure to rinse with water, noting that her mouth is completely covered in mud. Watching this tender display, Miri's blood boils with jealousy as she fumes over how a supposedly weaker girl gets to enjoy herself while true saints work tirelessly. Furifure beams with a massive, carefree smile, further infuriating Miri, who cannot fathom why this useless woman is allowed to be so happy. Shaking her head in furious denial, Miri desperately rationalizes that Furifure was merely picked up by a merchant to do manual labor and just happens to be on her day off. Refusing to entertain the thought any longer, Miri storms back to her carriage and commands her driver to immediately move on to the next farm. Miri arrogantly dismisses her failure to showcase her power, concluding that the clear sky proves a powerful saint must be nearby even though they never found the girl responsible for the crops. Throwing her arms up in jubilation, she completely ignores the mystery and excitedly waves at her guard to celebrate the massive haul of vegetables they purchased. She enthusiastically decides it is time to return to the Harvest Kingdom since they can now feast on all these delicious vegetables during the journey. Brimming with overconfidence, she notes that her father and uncle will be immensely pleased with the valuable information she managed to gather. Meanwhile, at the Riverside Kingdom's castle, A stoic aide approaches the king to report that their spy has finally returned from the Harvest Kingdom. Gripping the spy's report with a trembling hand, the king breaks into a cold sweat as he discovers Furifur's past treatment was horrifyingly worse than he ever imagined. His expression darkens into a scowl of pure disgust as he realizes the Harvest Kingdom essentially disposed of Furifur in the wilderness, effectively abandoning the very girl responsible for their good weather. The dark-haired aide calmly reminds the king that he too survived a grueling exile from the Harvest Kingdom thanks to Riverside's intervention, drawing a grim parallel to Furifur's long suffering. Bowing her head in deep respect, she praises the king's sharp intuition for being the sole reason Lady Furifur was rescued from a tragic fate. The king humbly deflects her praise, recalling the true miracle of finding food and water by simply relying on his gut instinct while wandering through his own exile. A mischievous grin suddenly spreads across the aide's face as she playfully questions if his remarkable intuition was intentionally failing during the recent public bath incident. Chuckling softly at his flustered panic, she admits she was genuinely worried he might angrily impose sanctions on the Harvest Kingdom, expressing relief at his usual composed restraint. The king's demeanor instantly shifts back to deadly seriousness as he warns that shadowy figures will inevitably try to steal Furifur away if her true power is ever exposed. Blushing furiously, he yells at his aide to stop teasing him after she jokingly suggests that marrying the naked Furifur would perfectly resolve all their diplomatic issues. Amused by his frantic reaction, the aide drops the joke entirely and agrees to assign additional guards to ensure Lady Furifur's constant protection. Later, the king politely approaches a completely oblivious Lady Furifur and gently asks if she has a spare moment to talk. Turning to him with wide, sparkling eyes, Furifur flashes a bright smile and eagerly asks what he needs. He carefully notes that despite supposedly boasting 3 holy saints, the Harvest Kingdom has been suffering from continuous, unending rain ever since she left. Staring up into the clear sky, he gently reminds her that she previously spent her days fervently praying for the Harvest Kingdom's weather. Probing deeper into the mystery, he cautiously asks if she was ever given any proper rewards in exchange for using her holy powers to save that entire nation. Furifur looks down with a faint hint of confusion, softly questioning why the king is suddenly asking about her past compensation. He seriously explains that troubling rumors are spreading, warning that he might permanently sever all diplomatic interactions with the Harvest Kingdom depending on the ugly truth. Horrified by the prospect of causing a war, Furifur nervously begs him to promise not to start a fight, prompting him to clarify that they will only defend themselves if attacked. Looking her straight in the eye, the king formally promises that he will never maliciously harm anyone from the Harvest Kingdom no matter what provocations occur. Visibly relieved, Furifur innocently drops a bombshell, revealing that her daily reward for saving the country was merely a single loaf of bread or pathetic leftovers. She joyfully adds that occasionally receiving old, used clothes made her incredibly happy, leaving the king and his aide completely stunned by the sheer cruelty of her past. The horrified king immediately interrupts her, desperately demanding to know exactly where she was forced to live after being taken to the palace. The scene abruptly shifts to the castle's exterior as a massive, bewildered shout of absolute shock echoes from within the walls. Furifur solemnly recounts how King Jalbur confined her to an underground prison, discarding her like trash while ruthlessly ordering her to release her sacred power to protect the nation. Smiling through her tragic memories, she describes the moment she got sick and was abandoned in a roadside ditch, only to miraculously wake up saved by this wonderful new country. The king and his aide stand frozen in grim silence, utterly appalled that the reality of her suffering was far worse than their darkest imaginations. Trembling with uncontained fury, the king aggressively declares that he absolutely cannot forgive this atrocity and insists they must sever all diplomatic ties immediately. The pragmatic aide logically points out that taking direct revenge is unnecessary because if they simply leave the Harvest Kingdom alone, it will inevitably collapse on its own. She coldly explains that unlike Riverside's historical ingenuity, the Harvest Kingdom is completely unprepared to survive the constant, unyielding rain now plaguing them. Ignoring Furifur's anxious reminder about the 3 remaining Saintesses, the aide accurately theorizes that the weather drastically deteriorated solely because Furifur was exiled. The king confesses his deepest fear that once the Harvest Kingdom realizes the utter uselessness of their remaining Saintesses, they will launch a desperate operation to kidnap Furifur. He quickly apologizes for dredging up her painful past, but is caught off guard when Furifur cheerfully insists she is actually overjoyed that he cares so much about her well-being. Blushing violently, The flustered king loudly proclaims that of course he cares about her. Instantly realizing how embarrassing his sudden outburst sounded, he stammers out a frantic, panicked apology. Sweating profusely, he nervously stutters that it would absolutely break his heart if his raised voice somehow ruined their ability to talk so warmly together. Touched by his raw sincerity, Furifure looks at him with shining, affectionate eyes as she realizes he truly treasures their time together far more than her sacred power. Desperately changing the subject to hide his intense embarrassment, the king gently asks if she spent her early years living in an orphanage. Closing her eyes with a faint, melancholic smile, she confirms that the orphanage was only her home during her early childhood. She quietly explains that after the king took her from the orphanage, her living conditions in the royal underground prison slowly deteriorated over time. The king's eyes widen in horrifying realization as she somberly mentions that all the other children from her orphanage were eventually discarded like trash, leaving her feeling relatively lucky. Smiling brightly despite the grim topic, Furifure proudly notes that those discarded children also possessed a remarkably sharp intuition, exactly like his own. Gripping her hands together with unshakable faith, she insists that those children must definitely still be alive out there somewhere. Her face radiates pure, unadulterated joy as she happily declares that no one in her entire life has ever cared about her as deeply as he does. Bursting with optimism, she eagerly asks the king to agree that her old friends are surely surviving out in the world. Gently reaching out to pat her head, the king warmly confirms her greatest hopes by revealing that those very children are actually living right here in this kingdom. A young girl embraces someone tightly. Her older brother gently squeezes her back, apologizing for not realizing her feelings sooner. He warmly reassures her that he is right here for her. Taken aback by his sudden words, the girl stares up at him in utter shock. Her memories drift back to her time living at the orphanage, a period she struggles to recall clearly. Though her memories of her beloved older brother are particularly hazy, a few vague moments still linger in her mind. In a flashback, a younger version of herself quietly peeks through the garden bushes. Her older brother discovers her hiding spot, greeting his little sister with a relieved smile. She joyfully calls out to him, completely covered in dirt. He playfully sighs about her love for playing in the mud, noting how dirty she gets. She giggles happily, explaining that rolling in the dirt simply makes her feel better. While all the children at the strict orphanage were stripped of their names and referred to only by numbers by the adults, there was one exception. She remembers one specific person who treated her differently. An older boy at the orphanage went out of his way to care for her. To her delight, he even affectionately called her his little sister. Even though they shared no blood relation, she eagerly started calling him her big brother in return. As he helps her scrub off the mud in a wooden tub to avoid another scolding, she revels in the nice, foamy bubbles. Mischievously, she scoops up a massive handful of soapy bubbles. She playfully declares she will get her big brother all nice and foamy too. With a sudden poof, she smashes the suds directly into his surprised face. Despite the strict life at the orphanage, the time she spent laughing and playing with her big brother was genuinely fun. Later that night, the children sleep huddled together on the hard, cold floor of the orphanage. Hearing a disturbance, the boy wakes up and gently asks his little sister what is wrong. Tears stream down her face as she sobs, explaining that she had a terrifying dream. She cries about being locked in a dark place by a yelling adult, prompting her brother to pull her into a comforting embrace and validate her fear. Snuggling her close beneath the blanket, he softly reassures her that it is okay because her big brother is right there with her. Gripping him tightly, she silently prays for more happy days spent alongside her beloved brother. Chuckling warmly in the dark, he agrees that more happy days sound incredibly nice. Smiling softly at her, he shares his own earnest prayer to always stay together with his little sister from now on. The two children drift peacefully to sleep, finding comfort in each other's warm presence. Snapping back to the present, the young woman tearfully asks the man standing before her if he is truly her long-lost big brother. A nearby woman confirms that it is indeed him. She reminisces how they used to call each other brother and sister since none of the orphans possessed real names. Gazing at her with an affectionate smile, he confirms that it really is her after all these years. Overcome with emotion, she pulls him into a desperate hug while sobbing that she has wanted to see him for so long. The observing woman expresses her joy at their reunion, realizing that Lady Furifure is the exact person His Majesty had been searching for. Returning her tight embrace, he tenderly admits that he has always wanted to see her too after such a long time. Flustered by their intense emotional display, The other woman chuckles and decides to step away to give the reunited siblings some privacy. Holding his sniffling sister, he anxiously asks how she managed to survive when everyone else was abandoned outside the Harvest Kingdom's royal capital. She recounts a harrowing journey of walking for dozens of days, miraculously surviving by finding food and water on instinct. Despite the terrible conditions, they eventually sought refuge at the Riverside Kingdom. Filled with immense relief, he is glad to hear that all the children from their old orphanage are now safely living in the Riverside Kingdom. Meanwhile, heavy rain relentlessly batters the towering stone walls of a distant castle. Watching the unending downpour, a panicked ruler fears his country will soon collapse. He angrily questions what their saint is doing to stop the disastrous weather. The king's advisor casually mentions that other saints are available and expects the main saint to return soon. He tries to justify the situation by claiming he thought things would be fine for a little while. Clicking his tongue in frustration, the enraged king snaps at Barbal for allowing Miri to leave on a trip. Sweating nervously, Barbal explains that he sent Miri away to impress neighboring countries and boost his family's reputation. He awkwardly laughs off the unexpected failure of their backup saints to fill her void. The frantic king complains that the ceaseless rain is ruining his kingdom now that Miri is using her powers in the Riverside Kingdom. He furiously laments that all the political consequences of this disaster fall squarely on his shoulders. Demanding that the sun must shine upon the Harvest Kingdom once again, the king gestures toward the dire situation. He sternly vows to take matters into his own hands if Barbal's reckless behavior continues. Suddenly, two sharp knocks echo through the room as a uniformed guard interrupts the tense meeting. The guard announces that he has an urgent report for His Majesty. Putting their current discussion on hold due to the urgent matter, the king bluntly dismisses his brother. Barbal looks confused and insulted as he is told he is no longer needed in the room. The king cold-heartedly reiterates that the incoming report does not concern his brother in the slightest. Angered by the disrespect, Barbal scoffs and haughtily reminds the king of his status as duke. With a bitter expression, Duke Barbal turns on his heel and storms down the opulent hallway. Growling in sheer rage, Barbal violently kicks a nearby object while cursing his royal brother. He viciously vows to drag the king off his throne without mercy if the belittling continues. At a rain-swept border checkpoint, Miri furiously demands to be let through, citing her high status as a noblewoman and saint. The stationed guards apologize but refuse her entry, stating they are strictly following His Majesty's royal command. A fuming Duke Barbal suddenly arrives at the checkpoint, prompting a surprised gasp from his niece. Approaching her stranded carriage, he darkly informs Miri that their grand plans are not going well. Frustrated by the sudden roadblock, Miri crosses her arms and lets out an annoyed growl. She bitterly complains that this interruption comes right when she was finally able to pray for the entire capital again. Standing beside her elegant carriage, Duke Barbal brings up a concerning piece of information. He mentions hearing from her father that she had been spending time in the Riverside Kingdom. Forcing a strained grin, Miri explains her recent trip was just a way to cheer herself up after feeling down lately. The frantic king orders her to use her saintly powers immediately to stop the relentless rain, complaining that his approval ratings have plummeted in her absence. Ignoring her protests about learning valuable information in the Riverside Kingdom, he ruthlessly cancels her requested salary increase as punishment for leaving without permission. Miri gasps in shock at the sudden, harsh penalty. Quickly changing the subject, she reveals that the Riverside Kingdom is no longer plagued by endless rain and has been enjoying beautiful weather. The king strokes his chin, concluding that the neighboring kingdom must have secretly acquired a powerful saint. Unfazed by his deduction, Miri eagerly adds that the foreign kingdom is now growing unbelievably delicious vegetables. Scoffing at her claim, the king insists that is impossible since the Riverside Kingdom still spends a fortune importing food from their lands. Tapping her chin thoughtfully, Miri confidently states that there were absolutely no signs of a food shortage because their agriculture has dramatically flourished. She angrily pouts and asks why her uncle isn't happy about the news, prompting him to snap that her vague rumors provide absolutely no useful information. Suddenly realizing a miscalculation, Miri claps her hands together in a brief moment of panic. Sweating nervously, she tries to deflect the blame by reminding him that she explicitly warned the other saints about her temporary absence. Crossing her arms with a triumphant smirk, Miri proudly points out that the disastrous rain has completely stopped now that her powers have returned. Giggling mischievously, she admits to eating almost all the imported vegetables during her ride back, leaving only a small portion as souvenirs for her father. The king abruptly steps toward her carriage and ruthlessly declares he will confiscate the remaining vegetables. Ignoring her whining protests, he angrily reminds her that his reputation hit rock bottom entirely because of her selfish actions. Meanwhile, sitting closely on an elegant couch, King Forced tenderly explains how he spent years searching for his beloved little sister after she was taken from the orphanage. Recalling his youth, he describes vowing to work relentlessly and climb the ranks after being adopted by the neighboring country. He carried massive stacks of documents and studied tirelessly, believing that gaining political power would help him gather information on her whereabouts. Gazing into her tearful eyes, he reveals that his relentless dedication earned the previous king's immense praise and eventually secured his position as the royal successor. His expression darkens with sorrow as he admits that even with the ultimate power of a king, he still could not track her down. Desperate and losing hope, he traveled to the Harvest Kingdom through pouring rain, terrified that she had been sold off or tragically killed. Gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, he softly smiles and explains how miraculously finding her on the roadside changed everything. Blushing deeply, the young woman clutches her chest as she realizes just how much agonizing trouble her brother went through to find her. Pulling her into a warm embrace, he confesses that the moment he saw her unconscious on the roadside, instinct immediately took over. He chuckles warmly, admitting that what started as a simple desire to help a stranger slowly transformed into genuine romantic love as they spent time together. Holding her tightly against his chest, he marvels at the surprising twist of fate that revealed his new love was actually his long-lost childhood sister. Staring deeply into her wide eyes, King Forced earnestly asks Lady Furifure to marry him. Her mind completely blanks, leaving her staring at him in utter, wide-eyed bewilderment. The heavy wooden doors suddenly slam open with a deafening crash, violently startling the romantic couple. Standing in the doorway with a frantic expression, Miri loudly bursts into the room while stammering in complete confusion. The king snaps his head toward the intruder, his face flushing crimson as he shouts out in panicked embarrassment. Lady Furifure jolts in her seat, letting out a sharp gasp of pure shock. Watching from the sidelines, a dark-haired attendant wipes away happy tears and cheerfully congratulates the king for finally confessing. Sweating profusely and trembling with embarrassment, Forced desperately begs everyone to wait a minute and process the situation. With dizzy spirals spinning in her eyes, the overwhelmed young woman stammers brokenly as her brain entirely short-circuits. Unable to process the massive romantic revelation, she weakly groans and completely gives up on trying to understand the situation. She violently faints straight back onto the plush couch as both the king and the attendant rush forward in sheer panic. Meanwhile, outside the Grand Ducal estate, Miri unleashes a deafening, dramatic wail that echoes through the courtyard as she calls out for her father. The panicked Duke rushes to his daughter's side, completely falling for her award-winning fake tears as she dramatically blames her uncle. Shaking with feigned trauma, the young saint claims that her cruel uncle ruthlessly robbed her of her precious belongings. She violently sobs about the stolen souvenir vegetables, pushing the enraged Duke to realize his brother has finally crossed an unforgivable line. The furious Duke suddenly freezes in his tracks, utterly bewildered by the mention of stolen produce. Wiping away her fake tears, she whines that the king confiscated her hard-earned vegetables solely as a petty punishment for her unapproved vacation. Dropping his shoulders in sheer exhaustion, the Duke flatly asks if her massive emotional breakdown was entirely over some missing souvenirs. Instantly switching gears, the overprotective father pulls his daughter into a fierce hug and vows showing zero mercy to his brother for making her cry. Miri immediately beams with wicked delight as her father promises to make the king deeply regret his petty confiscation. Calming down from his protective rage, the Duke smoothly transitions the conversation to ask for a status report on her trip to the Riverside Kingdom. Waving her hands enthusiastically, Miri eagerly debriefs her father on the shocking agricultural prosperity she witnessed during her travels. The Duke's face goes deathly pale as he bites his thumb in sheer terror, realizing that the rival kingdom somehow possesses an impossible Saintess. Contemplating his next move, a man wonders if the Harvest Kingdom is the only place where he can succeed and display his power. Filled with ambition, he vows to drag his older brother down from the throne and claim the king's seat for himself. Outside the grand castle walls, a voice checks in to see if someone has finally calmed down. Receiving gentle pats on the head, Furifure shyly admits that she has managed to settle her nerves somehow. Flustered and blushing, she asks the smiling king if it is truly all right for a monarch to marry her. The king affectionately touches her face, assuring her that as the country's savior, absolutely no one would oppose welcoming her as their queen. Confused by his grand praise, Furifure looks away and admits she doesn't actually recall saving the country. King Forced explains that her daily hobby of farming and playing in the mud has done much more than just save the royal palace. He reveals that her actions stopped the continuous rain and completely solved the nation's severe food shortage. Pumping his fist with enthusiasm, the king declares that even if she is unaware of it, she is undeniably saving the country. Furifure realizes that His Majesty is deeply pleased, even though she was simply having fun playing with nature. A dark-haired maiden chimes in, noting that considering Furifure's massive achievements, her relationship with the king will be perfectly received. She proposes waiting for the right timing to publicly announce Furifure as a Saintess and showcase her vast contributions to the country. When Furifure worries about her own feelings being enough, her friend reassures her that her emotions matter far more than public opinion and gossip. Beaming with joy, Furifure declares that she wants to be with His Majesty and would love to stay by King Forced's side always. Surprised and overjoyed, the king tightly squeezes her hands and thanks her profusely. Trembling with sudden embarrassment, Furifure realizes that he just called her by her name without using the polite title of Lady. Leaning in with an eager smile, the king asks if she will also drop the Your Majesty and call him by his name from now on. When she stammers that it is too sudden, King Forced immediately slumps his shoulders and looks dejected. Panicking at his sad expression, Furifure gets incredibly flustered and cries out that she doesn't know what to do when he looks so disappointed. Gathering her courage, she nervously stutters out his name as Mr. Forced. Chuckling softly, Forced gently strokes her hair and reassures her that it is perfectly fine. Looking deeply into her eyes, he promises to do his best so that someday she will feel totally comfortable calling him by his name. The next morning, Furifure wakes up naturally as cheerful birds chirp outside her sunlit window. Lying under her covers with a blushing face, she wonders if her sweet moments with King Forced were all just a dream. Overcome by intense embarrassment, she violently rolls back and forth across her bed while clutching her pillow and squealing. Sitting at her vanity, her maid Aqua brushes her hair and warmly notes that she is awake quite early this morning. Aqua reminds her that today is a day off from the country farm tour and asks how she plans to spend her free time. Glancing down shyly, Furifure confesses that the conversation she had with Forced yesterday made her incredibly happy. She fondly reflects on how she used to love Forced so much, almost as if he were her big brother. Clutching her dress, she explains that realizing he had been searching for her all this time made her heart feel warm and tightly squeezed. Filled with gratitude, she desperately wants to convey more of her feelings to Forced and thank him for finding her so many times. Hearing this, Aqua immediately gets an idea and suggests a special plan for her. While Aqua shivers at her undeniable cuteness, Furifure ponders a good way to thank Forced for the trouble she caused by falling asleep at the spa. Aqua suggests that instead of leaving it to the royal palace chefs, Lady Furifure should try making something herself today. She recommends offering His Majesty some handmade sweets for their upcoming tea time. Aqua confidently assures her that the king will be absolutely delighted to receive a handmade item crafted with all her heart. Furifure worries because she has never cooked before, but Aqua eagerly places a supportive hand on her shoulder and vows to help. Dressed in matching frilly aprons, Furifure and Aqua march into the kitchen ready to begin their baking mission. Aqua decides they will start with some simple beginner cookies, which Furifure happily recalls eating before. Standing at the counter, Aqua instructs that they must first measure out all the ingredients. The two girls cheerfully whisk the batter together in a large bowl. Chaos ensues as Furifure clumsily dumps a massive bag of flour, sending a huge white cloud exploding into Aqua's face. Finding the dough surprisingly difficult to knead, Furifure groans while Aqua smiles and encourages her to do her best at her own pace. Aqua tells her to picture King Forced eating the treats and to shape the dough into hearts, causing Furifure's chest to feel tight again. Overwhelmed by the romantic thought, Furifure claims she might feel sick and dreads the royal physician, though Aqua casually reminds her it isn't an illness. Gazing at their completed handiwork, Furifure thanks Aqua for teaching her while the maid praises her for making them so skillfully. With a playful wink, Aqua announces that all that is left is to bake them, smartly suggesting they let the royal chef handle the oven to avoid getting burned. Later, a nervous Furifure knocks on the study door, prompting King Forced to invite her in. Surprised at his desk, Forced realizes it is already time for tea as Furifure shyly reveals she brought special sweets today. Gazing in awe at a beautifully wrapped basket, Forst discovers a generous pile of heart-shaped cookies. Overwhelmed with sudden joy, he clutches the basket and wonders if Furifure actually made these treats just for him. Furifure bashfully admits that the royal chef was the one who baked them, but an eager Forst still asks if he may eat them. Taking a bite with a satisfying crunch, Forst praises the delicious taste with his eyes closed in pure bliss. Chewing the treat, he declares himself a happy man, marveling that the day has finally come to eat such delicious cookies prepared by Furifure. As her maid encourages His Majesty to continue enjoying the snacks, Furifure's heart throbs so wildly that Forst notices her intense blushing. Assuming she feels unwell, Forst affectionately offers to feed her himself, causing Furifure to panic and insist he doesn't need to go that far. Forst asks if she is going to have any, and Furifure timidly questions if sharing them is truly alright. Smiling gently, Forst tells her it is completely fine and playfully instructs her to just open her mouth. Blushing furiously, Furifure leans forward and accepts the sweet treat directly from his hand. Trembling with extreme embarrassment as she chews, Furifure decides to return the favor by holding up a cookie and telling Forst to say. Forst leans in curiously, waiting for the treat as Furifure softly calls his name. With tears of profound gratitude in her eyes, she thanks him deeply for absolutely everything he has done for her up until now. Looking forward to their future, she declares that she would be incredibly happy if they could stay together forever from now on. Forst warmly embraces the tearful Furifure while her maid looks on with a contented smile. Meanwhile, a gloomy and ominous atmosphere hangs over the grand, towering architecture of the Harvest Kingdom's castle. Standing before a pile of shriveled crops, the Harvest King grimly reflects on how the royal palace's vegetables suddenly plummeted in quality during a long spell of rain. His companion angrily recalls seeing the exiled Furifure sleeping carelessly in a Riverside Kingdom farm field, shocking the king who assumed she had dropped dead in the wilderness. Staring intently at a plump, vibrant tomato, the Harvest King begins to suspect an impossible truth about the origin of these high-quality vegetables. Desperate for confirmation, he takes a massive, messy bite right out of the raw fruit. Trembling with realization, he recognizes the overflowing vitality and identical flavor of the crops they used to effortlessly grow back in the royal palace. Crushing the tomato in a furious rage, he curses the realization that the bountiful vegetables and clear weather were entirely the result of Furifure's sacred power. Splattering juice everywhere, he refuses to believe the seemingly dumb woman orchestrated her own exile just to escape his control. Driven by utter selfishness, he vows to drag Furifure back and confine her entirely in the dungeon to endlessly siphon her sacred power. Knowing he must prevent an international incident, the king decides to secretly hire dangerous mercenaries for this dark task. At the kingdom's imposing gates, an official confirms with a departing team that they are secretly heading straight to the kingdom of Riverside. The gate guards express concern over the small size of the expedition group, but the undercover operatives brush it off as no problem. The king, wearing a grim scowl, stresses that this covert expedition must remain an absolute secret so the public never learns they are retrieving the very woman they exiled. The nervous guards glance toward a heavily fortified carriage and question the rough-looking men stationed nearby. The arrogant king dismisses the hired underworld thugs as mere lowlifes, but assures the guards that these off-the-books intelligence agents will easily spirit Furifure away. A brainwashed guard easily falls for the king's manipulative rhetoric, proudly praising King Jalpal as the undisputed pride of their nation. Exploiting his subjects' blind loyalty, the king declares that a leader must take drastic action during such a severe national emergency. He cruelly details his plan to toss Furifure into the criminals' carriage the moment they retrieve her and lock her away in the palace dungeons permanently. Sitting back with a sinister smirk, he fantasizes about exploiting her holy power for his own gain until the very day she dies. Riding along the trail, one of the officers cautiously asks the driver if he has ever found Furifure to be attractive. The men burst into cruel laughter, mocking her as utterly repulsive skin and bones and claiming they have never seen a more hideous woman. As the horse-drawn carriages roll across the barren landscape, the men ruthlessly agree that even touching her wouldn't spark a single shred of romantic interest. The covert caravan finally arrives, passing through the grand gates into a bustling, lively town. The disguised king is shocked by the thriving environment, noting that this completely different country now mirrors the prosperity of his own harvest kingdom from a while back. Spotting crates overflowing with perfectly ripe fruit, the men instantly realize that Furifure is truly here and responsible for the bounty. Glaring with malevolent intent, the king orders his hired thugs to proceed exactly according to their sinister plan. The scarred underworld mercenaries flash wicked, confident grins and tell the king to leave the kidnapping entirely to them. Sweating with desperate greed, the king silently vows to get Furifure back no matter the cost. Meanwhile, a delicate hand reaches peacefully up toward the beautifully bright sky. Completely oblivious to the looming danger, Furifure lies in a grassy field and sighs happily about another beautiful day. She reflects on how playing in the dirt and soaking up the warm sun makes her feel significantly better every single day. Smiling softly to herself, she admits she never would have realized this peaceful joy if she hadn't come to the kingdom of Riverside. She realizes that she feels completely different physically, no longer suffering from the listless exhaustion that plagued her back in the Harvest Kingdom. Returning to her friends after a fun day of work, Furifure cheerfully declares that she received so much wonderful energy from everyone. As Furifure beams with innocent joy, her diligent mate steps away to go arrange the carriage for their journey home. Startled by a sudden, swift movement, an armored guard and a wide-eyed young girl look up in alarm. Reaching out her gloved hand in sheer bewilderment, the girl gasps as a panicked voice cries out for Lady Flafer. Suddenly, a group of rugged, armed men brandishing swords completely surround the pair, aggressively demanding to know their identities. Letting out a sharp gasp of terror, Lady Flafer watches as her royal escorts instantly draw their blades to confront the encroaching bandits in the sunlit woods. Shielding her from the immediate danger, a deeply concerned defender frantically asks if Lady Flafer is completely unharmed by the sudden ambush. Still trembling within a protective embrace, a deeply confused Lady Flafer shakily questions the true identities of their mysterious attackers. Meanwhile, outside a rustic building, an exasperated uniformed official questions an elderly woman, demanding to know why she flatly refuses to sell her goods despite his generous financial offer. Clutching her shawl with quiet dignity, the elderly woman offers a polite but firm apology, explicitly stating that bulk purchases are strictly forbidden. Gesturing toward the freshly harvested baskets, she explains that the community's vegetables belong to everyone, making a complete monopoly utterly prohibited. Puffing his chest with immense pride, the arrogant commander declares they hail from the illustrious kingdom of Harvest, condescendingly assuming the woman must be a foreigner. Gripping her shovel firmly, the woman calmly schools the thoroughly shocked official on a brand new law dictating that any vegetables taken out of the country are strictly subject to hefty customs duties. As the official grunts in bitter frustration over his sheer ignorance of the rule, the uncompromising woman dismissively advises him to take his petty complaints directly to the royal palace. Regrouping with his uniformed subordinates near a waiting carriage, the calculating official decisively orders his men to rendezvous with their undercover agents and initiate formal negotiations with the palace. Crossing his arms in a display of barely contained irritation, the mustachioed commander glares off into the distance, silently brooding over this unexpected bureaucratic obstacle. Confronting the returning band of mercenaries, the furious official demands to know if their primary target was present, only to be hit with the bitter news that the entire operation has completely failed. The defeated thugs confess that the target security was unimaginably tight, prompting the scheming official to realize the host country already has them securely in their grasp, forcing a massive strategic rethink. Flashing a deeply sinister smile, the official leans in and tempts the mercenary leader with a highly lucrative special mission, promising a substantial financial bonus for guaranteed success. Outside the towering, majestic walls of the royal palace, desperate voices urgently echo through the air, frantically calling out Lady Flafer's name. Sitting up in her lavish, silk-sheeted bed, a thoroughly exhausted Lady Flafer groggily rubs her teary eyes and weakly mumbles a sleepy morning greeting. A cheerful maid named Aqua happily announces the start of the day, expressing profound relief that her young lady is feeling completely well as Flafer drowsily mumbles about breakfast. The light-hearted atmosphere vanishes instantly as Aqua adopts a deadly serious expression, alarming Flafer by revealing that a highly critical situation has suddenly developed within the palace. A look of pure shock washes over Flafer's face as the maid grimly explains that His Majesty, the formidable king of the Harvest Kingdom, has arrived for an unprecedentedly early morning visit. Gripping the young girl's shoulders with intense urgency, Aqua strictly forbids a panicked Lady Flafer from taking even a single step outside the safety of her bedchamber. Pushing back against the sudden confinement, a highly distressed Flafer argues that this constitutes a genuine emergency, insisting she absolutely must intervene to stop Lord Forst. Pacing across the elegant room, Aqua issues a dire warning that if the volatile Lord Forced completely loses his temper and sparks a massive altercation, it would result in an absolute political disaster. Narrowing her eyes in deep suspicion, Aqua gravely theorizes that this unannounced royal visit is directly connected to Lady Flafer, warning of a highly plausible plot to forcibly kidnap her. Trembling with escalating fear, Flafer visualizes the ruthless King Jarpal as Aqua grimly reminds her that the tyrant will absolutely never hesitate to use extreme, unpredictable means to achieve his dark desires. Cementing her protective stance, the deeply devoted maid firmly concludes that the king's sheer ruthlessness provides all the more reason for Lady Flafer to remain completely hidden. Refusing to cower in isolation, a remarkably brave Flafer firmly counters the maid's logic, arguing that remaining a stationary, isolated target in her room might actually be exponentially more dangerous. Grasping her loyal maid's arms with absolute, unyielding determination, Lady Flafer fiercely insists that they must immediately seek an audience with His Majesty for true protection. Displaying remarkable strategic insight, the young lady brilliantly reasons that an enemy who stops at nothing would easily kidnap her if isolated, making the king's immediate presence her strongest possible shield. Her eyes sparkling with immense admiration, Aqua enthusiastically claps her hands together, loudly praising Lady Flafer for her incredibly sharp and brilliant tactical deduction. Emboldened by this profound revelation, Aqua boldly declares they are completely ignoring His Majesty's prior lockdown orders, fiercely prioritizing Lady Flafer's ultimate safety above all else. Snapping into rapid action, Aqua urgently commands the flustered young noble to change out of her sleepwear instantly, noting she absolutely cannot meet a foreign monarch in mere pajamas. Wasting not a single precious second, the two girls swiftly sprint down the grand, echoing corridors, entirely abandoning the massive, unmade bed behind them. Peeking cautiously around a sharp corner with her golden hair flowing, Lady Flafer whispers in relief that the immediate hallway is completely devoid of any lurking guards or threats. Meanwhile, back in the abandoned bedroom, the two ruthless mercenaries kick open the door, realizing their high-value target might have narrowly escaped but violently swearing to track her down. Trembling in the suffocating shadows just outside, a wide-eyed Flafer tightly clutches her chest, coming to the horrifying realization that the armed intruders were absolutely sent to capture her. Halting his aggressive search, one of the perplexed mercenaries suddenly points out a massive, glittering pile of pure gold coins deliberately scattered across the plush bedroom floor. Completely blinded by sudden greed, the ecstatic thugs instantly abandon their complex kidnapping plot, eagerly deciding to steal the massive fortune and flee since it vastly exceeds their promised mercenary pay. Watching from her hidden vantage point, a thoroughly devastated Lady Flafer dramatically wails in sheer, comedic agony as the greedy intruders successfully abscond with all her incredibly precious treasures. Bursting into anime-style tears of absolute profound despair, the young girl loudly laments that she had painstakingly lined up every single one of those beautiful gold coins. Suddenly, a strikingly handsome, blonde royal bursts onto the scene, immediately pulling the tearful Flafer into a desperate, protective embrace and thanking the heavens for her continued safety. While the confused young girl blinks away her tears, a deeply frantic Aqua urgently informs His Majesty that dangerous, armed intruders have successfully breached Lady Flafer's private chambers. His eyes narrowing with dark intensity, the protective monarch explains he instinctively sensed grave danger and immediately dispatched elite guards, having initially ordered Aqua to keep Flafer strictly confined. Completely ignoring the massive political assassination plot, a deeply depressed Lady Flafer continues to sob uncontrollably over the tragic, unforgivable theft of her perfectly arranged, beloved golden treasure. Deep in analytical thought, the sharp-minded king correctly deduces that the intruder's true ultimate objective was Flafer herself, noting that real professionals wouldn't normally be easily distracted by a few scattered coins. Hearing this flawless tactical breakdown, a wide-eyed Aqua lets out a sharp gasp of sudden realization, looking up at His Majesty with immense, newfound respect. Flashing a deeply condescending, arrogant smirk, the highly amused monarch openly mocks the rival kingdom's utterly pathetic attempt, declaring the assassins sent after Flafer were spectacularly incompetent. Blinking in utter, adorable confusion, Lady Flafer listens as the bewildered royal guard formally reports that the highly trained intruders literally just grabbed the shiny gold and abandoned the entire high-stakes kidnapping plot. Lord Forced, looking deeply concerned, quietly suggests they keep the captured intruders a secret from the King of Harvest for now. Surprised, Lady Flafer asks if he intends to hide this vital fact, to which he replies it will strategically give them the upper hand in negotiations. Apologizing to Flafer, Forst explains she must hide her true identity and seamlessly blend in with the guards just in case she needs to join the meeting. Beaming with innocent excitement, Flafer eagerly agrees to hide, cheerfully comparing the covert mission to a fun game of hide-and-seek. Gazing at her with profound fondness, Forst admits he is deeply relieved to see her remaining so completely calm despite the danger. While Flafer insists she feels totally safe by his side, Aqua firmly warns her that his majesty is the real problem and she must absolutely not rise to his provocations. Gently but firmly, Forst reaches out and reassuringly places his large, comforting hand upon the top of Flafer's head. With a warm and protective smile, the handsome lord holds the young girl close as she looks up at him with wide, sparkling eyes. Clutching her pounding chest, a severely flustered Flafer mentally panics, realizing her heart is suddenly racing for a completely different reason than fear of King Jarpal. Reassuring herself that everything will be fine since Lord Forst is with her, she finds immense newfound courage in his protective presence. With their resolve fully steeled, Forst officially declares it is finally time for them to go. Walking with authoritative purpose, Lord Forst approaches the magnificent royal throne room where King Jarpal and his military retinue eagerly await. Maintaining a stoic and icy demeanor, Forst takes his seat as the imposing, fur-clad King Jarpal glares back at him with a hidden agenda. Bowing with mock politeness, King Jarpal expresses deep gratitude for the sudden audience, while Forst dismissively notes the matter seemed highly urgent. Hiding nervously among the uniformed guards, a sweating Flafer notes Forst's eerie calmness and desperately prays a violent diplomatic fight does not break out. Cutting straight to the chase, King Jarpal boldly declares his nation's desire to import food, prompting Forst to casually ask for his exact reasoning. Feigning dramatic distress, Jarpal claims the Harvest Kingdom is suffering from severe abnormal rain that even their holy maiden cannot stop, pushing them toward a catastrophic food crisis. While the foreign king theatrically weeps about overcoming this devastating crisis, Forst coldly acknowledges the alleged severity of the situation. Leaning on his hand in calculating thought, Forst quietly listens as Jarpal humbly begs for the Riverside Kingdom's immense agricultural strength. Jarpal explosively rejects the standard price of 2 gold coins as preposterous, aggressively demanding an absurd trade rate of only 1 gold coin per crate. Attempting to justify his massive lowball offer, the Harvest King insists his struggling nation cannot feed its people and that his citizens would absolutely reject a higher price. Reminding the arrogant king of historical precedent, Forst sharply points out they have always purchased vegetables at the standard 2-coin rate without issue. Annoyed that his manipulative pricing tactic completely failed, King Jarpal clicks his tongue and grimaces in visible, ugly frustration. A sinister, predatory smirk slowly spreads across Jarpal's face as he internally pivots his dark political strategy directly toward Flafer. Smoothly transitioning to ease the tension, a polite royal attendant offers the hostile king a fresh sample of their locally grown produce. Sneering with supreme arrogance, Jarpal doubts that a constantly raining country could possibly harvest anything decent, openly questioning the true worth of the crops. Chuckling at the Riverside nation's sheer confidence, Jarpal arrogantly pops the vegetable sample into his mouth to test their bold claims. His eyes widening in absolute shock, the Harvest King instantly changes his tune, marveling at how unbelievably delicious the food tastes. While Jarpal finds the strangely familiar flavor highly suspicious, a disguised Flafer silently trembles, completely unable to feel happy about the high praise. A sudden, horrifying realization strikes the foreign king as he recognizes the distinct taste as the exact same vegetables they used to harvest back in his own homeland. Feigning grave concern, the manipulative Jarpal warns Forst of terrible news, suggesting that the very Saintess they exiled might be secretly hiding within Riverside. Resting his chin on his hand with utter unbothered grace, Lord Forst narrows his eyes and coldly demands the king clarify his sudden accusation. Weaving a massive, venomous lie, Jarpal claims the Saintess named Flafer maliciously abused her divine power and completely ruined the Harvest Kingdom's weather. Staring in pure, unadulterated horror, the disguised Flafer desperately thinks to herself that she never committed any such atrocious acts. Continuing his theatrical deception, Jarpal claims they had no choice but to painfully exile the supposedly irredeemable girl after throwing her in the dungeon. Gripping the trembling girl tightly, Aqua silently comforts a deeply traumatized Flafer as the young Saintess internally screams that every single word is an absolute lie. Pacing dramatically, Jarpal points out the highly suspicious timing of Riverside's suddenly clear skies, claiming this completely changes the nature of their negotiations. Reaching the climax of his fabricated story, the corrupt king loudly accuses the criminal Flafer of deliberately stealing their rain clouds to destroy the Harvest Kingdom. Flashing a deeply wicked, predatory grin, Jarpal openly questions the sheer morality of a harvest gained through such supposedly ill-gotten means. Leveraging his massive lie, Jarpal ruthlessly demands that Riverside surrender half of all their harvested vegetables entirely free of charge and immediately report the Saintess. Rather than caving to the immense pressure, Lord Forst simply lowers his head and lets out a dark, highly amused chuckle. Highly offended by the sudden disrespect, King Jarpal scowls deeply and angrily demands to know what Forst finds so incredibly funny. Sitting tall upon his throne, Forst drops his calm facade and sharply counters that the objective facts he personally knows are entirely different from the king's fictional tale. Gesturing dismissively, the brilliant lord reveals that during his previous visit to the Harvest Kingdom, the land was already incomparably desolate. Delivering a crushing blow, Forst explains that on his way back, he personally rescued a severely malnourished woman covered in brutal bruises and tattered clothes. Piercing Jarpal with a deadly, unwavering glare, Lord Forst asks the sweating monarch if he knows exactly what name that dying woman gave when she finally woke up. Absolute panic washes over King Jarpal and his horrified retinue as they simultaneously realize the devastating truth that Forst physically has the real Flafer. Sweating profusely, a desperate Jarpal violently backpedals, frantically screaming that Forst has completely fabricated this story to evade his political demands. Remaining perfectly composed, Lord Forst casually asks what he could possibly gain from lying, swearing that every single word he just spoke is the undeniable truth. Flashing a dangerously sharp, knowing smile, Forst ruthlessly corners the terrified king, noting that lying during diplomatic talks with a foreign monarch would be utterly dishonest. Someone questions the claims against King Forst, pointing out the complete lack of evidence. As tensions rise in the throne room, attendees murmur in confusion about what these accusations truly mean. The guards whisper among themselves, realizing that Lord Jalpru's own position might now be in serious jeopardy. Scoffing defensively, Jalpru turns his head and stubbornly denies having any idea what they are talking about. A tense silence falls over the room as a quiet moment passes between the characters before the ultimate truth is revealed. Steeling her resolve with a soft breath, the young girl prepares to step out into the open. Startled by the sudden order to bring her forward, the hidden girl is coaxed out into the light. Reassuring her that the game of hide and seek is over, her protector gently tells her it is time to answer their questions. Trembling slightly as she admits her fear, Lady Flafer is encouraged to fight back while everyone vows to protect her. Stepping gracefully forward, she boldly addresses King Jalpuru after such a long time. As she is formally introduced as the girl who lived in his country's dungeon, a bewildered Jalpuru demands to know who she is. Jalpuru insists King Forst is lying, claiming the real Flafer in his country definitely lacked such a beautiful appearance. He openly admits that a girl this gorgeous would easily be considered a strong candidate for a fiancé. Doubting her identity entirely, Jalpur argues that the real prisoner was merely a scrawny, bone-thin girl. Calmly dismissing his doubts, King Forst explains that her drastically improved appearance simply shows how much she has recovered. Attempting to trap her with an impossible question, Jalpur challenges Flafer to name the cook and coachman from her exile. Flafer plainly states that she cannot answer because she was never told their actual names. Instead, she points directly at the armored gentleman and the hiding man, identifying them perfectly by sight as the cook and coachman. Gathering her courage to tell them everything, she angrily recalls how the coachman's reckless driving made her incredibly sick. Continuing her grim testimony, she reveals the terrible cook would crush bread in front of her or serve mud-covered food. After they abandoned her, she was forced to jump out because he threatened to kill her if she threw up. Pausing to think about what else she knows regarding His Majesty Jalpuru, a sudden realization strikes her. Pumped up by her own momentum, she excitedly decides she absolutely must tell everyone the juicy details about King Jalpuru. An increasingly panicked Jalpuru demands to know why she is suddenly bringing up his preference for girls with softer figures. Flafer innocently mentions hearing about a shop named Shokin that he always enthusiastically looks forward to visiting. Color completely drains from Jalpuru's face as his deepest, most embarrassing secrets are laid bare in the throne room. She casually repeats his own creepy words about psyching himself up for higher-level women at Shokin. Humiliated and utterly defeated, Jiaopu desperately begs her to stop talking. Flavor mocks his supposed state business, revealing he just brought his meal staff and coachman along for his secret trips. Playing the innocent card perfectly, she tilts her head and asks if she said something wrong to the stunned crowd. King Forced mercifully stops her, apologizing while admitting he has definitely heard enough of the terrifyingly candid truth. The surrounding attendees erupt into a chaotic sweat, completely shocked by the horrifying revelations about Majesty Jiaopu. Murmurs ripple through the crowd as they debate her angelic appearance and realize the gravity of her accusations. Refusing to yield, Jiaopu wildly accuses King Forced of using a fake flavor to set a trap and frame him. To decisively shatter his remaining doubts, King Forced orders his men to bring out the recently captured prisoners for definitive proof. As Jiaopu stammers, attendees gasp in recognition at the very spies His Majesty originally hired. Two blindfolded and tightly bound men are forced to their knees before the royal assembly. King Forced mockingly asks if Jiaopu's intelligence agents normally engage in the theft of scattered gold coins from Flavor's room. Jiaopu callously disowns his own captured intelligence agents, instructing King Forced to execute them and dispose of them immediately. Realizing they have been completely set up by their own employer, the condemned men curse the bastards who betrayed them. The captured spies finally piece together that the suspiciously scattered gold coins were bait for a cooperative execution trap. Intrigued by their realization, the interrogator asks what terrible crimes required both countries to work together to capture them. The furious spies reveal they were promised 20 gold coins and full pardons simply to kidnap the criminal Flavor. Flavor casually mentions she only used those very real gold coins as simple room decorations. Stunned beyond belief by the absurdity of the situation, the tied-up spies resign themselves to execution. An exasperated voice reminds Flavor that her habit of displaying pretty gold coins is exactly why she was warned repeatedly. With the absolute truth finally exposed, a piercing gaze falls upon Lord Jiaopu to see if he has any remaining objections. The room explodes in outrage as the crowd finally realizes Flavor was the true Saintess and King Jiaopu is a villainous fraud. Crushed by the overwhelming weight of his exposed crimes, Jiaopu collapses to the floor in absolute disgrace. Driven completely mad by the situation, Jiaopu screams out his final, pathetic demand regarding the displayed gold coins. A heavy sack overflows with gleaming gold coins as a mischievous giggle echoes in the air. Beaming with pure joy, Flaffle excitedly cradles the returned gold coins in her open palms. The gleaming metal pieces plink and clink loudly as she happily plays with her recovered treasure. Staring down with a mixture of skepticism and exasperation, Aqua cautiously calls out to her lady. Already growing tired from her efforts, Flaffle desperately begs her companion for some much-needed assistance. Hesitating with a heavy sigh, Aqua bluntly asks if her mistress actually plans to line up every single gold coin all over again. Flaffle innocently argues that the recent piece justifies her hobby, but Aqua sharply reminds her that currency is definitely not meant for decoration. Thoroughly defeated by Aqua's stern logic, a sweating Flaffle lets out a long, disappointed sigh of reluctant agreement. The quiet moment is suddenly interrupted as a new arrival announces they have something important to discuss with Flaffle. Stepping into the room with an amused chuckle, King Forced notes her unusual coin arrangement, which Flaffle enthusiastically defends as absolutely essential room decor. Kneeling beside her with a warm smile, the king completely stuns Aqua by actively offering to help arrange the ridiculous treasure. Standing stiffly in shock, Aqua demands to know if His Majesty is serious, but he gently counters that these specific coins literally saved Flaffle's life. Looking down with a darkening, solemn expression, the king fervently vows that he doubts such a terrifying ordeal will ever happen again. Meanwhile, back in the Grand Hall, a furious Jiaopu curses violently as armored guards forcefully restrain him on the marble floor. Towering over the disgraced ruler, the commander declares that Jiaopu will be deported back to his own country to face strict, unavoidable punishment. The Harvest Kingdom's representatives kneel in deep, trembling apology for their failures while Jiaopu is unceremoniously dragged away slipping and sliding. King Forced sternly orders the trembling diplomats to take the captured evildoers back with them to preserve whatever remains of their country's honor. Glaring with absolute authority, King Forced demands they expose Jiaopu's crimes and publicly acknowledge Flaffle as the true saint in exchange for a future vegetable trade. Sweating and completely overwhelmed, the desperate diplomats immediately agree to the strict terms to secure the promised vegetable trade. Bowing their heads deeply before the royal pair, The relieved representatives express their profound gratitude and swear to see the demands perfectly fulfilled. A lingering thought ripples through the tense air, questioning if this massive political conflict is truly concluding so abruptly. The grim reality sets in that despite the successful negotiations, they still cannot take any desperately needed vegetables back home today. Suddenly breaking the formality, an anxious Flaffel grabs King Forst's cravat and frantically begs him to pause the proceedings. Looking up with tearful, pleading eyes, she begs him to share just a little food because she remembers the agonizing pain of collapsing from starvation. She gently points out the tragic irony that the so-called Harvest Kingdom is currently struggling to find enough food for its own survival. Surprised by her pure heart, King Forst lets out an amused sigh and chuckles softly at her endless compassion. Smiling warmly at the diplomats, the king announces that today's palace harvest will be freely given to them as support rather than a transactional trade. The three Harvest Kingdom representatives completely break down into tears of joy, loudly thanking the king for his incredible, life-saving generosity. The king humbly deflects their tearful praise, explicitly attributing the massive gift entirely to Flaffel's earnest and kind-hearted request. Flushing with bashful pride at the incredible outcome, Flaffel closes her eyes and lets out a soft, undeniably happy giggle. The overwhelmed diplomats bow even lower to the floor, continuously shouting their tearful thanks to both King Forst and their true Saintess. Pumped up by the emotional victory, Flaffel excitedly volunteers to help with the physical harvest, prompting the diplomats to eagerly offer their manual labor too. Watching the chaotic but heartwarming scene unfold, Aqua softly agrees with the kneeling king that Flaffel is simply too kind for her own good. Gazing thoughtfully into the distance, Aqua reflects on the absolute impossibility of ever earning such high favor with the Harvest Kingdom in their dark past. With grateful tears pricking her eyes, a deeply moved Aqua silently credits this miraculous political and emotional shift entirely to Lady Flaffel. Returning to the present coin-sorting dilemma in the bedroom, Aqua sighs in fond defeat and accepts that she simply cannot stop her mistress's silly hobby. Flaffel's eyes widen with massive, sparkling hope as she excitedly realizes her strict caretaker is actually going to help her arrange the treasure. Winking playfully as she expertly snaps a coin into place, Aqua jokes that they would be stuck until morning if she didn't use her memorized knowledge of the pattern. Completely overjoyed by the unexpected assistance, Flaffel lets out another radiant giggle and warmly thanks her loyal friend. Working in perfect harmony, King Forst, Flaffel, and Aqua kneel together on the floor, happily snapping the gold coins into an elaborate decorative pattern. Joyous laughter fills the cozy bedroom as the trio enjoys a rare, genuinely peaceful moment bonding over the utterly ridiculous task. Later that night under the glow of a full moon, a deeply satisfied Flaffel stretches on her bed and happily reflects on the day's wonderful events. She revels in the warm memory of arranging the treasure with her friends, thrilled that her beloved gold coins are finally back where they belong. Snuggling deep into her plush pillows, she giggles softly into the quiet room, incredibly glad that even the strict Aqua joined their silly game. Closing her eyes with a perfectly peaceful smile, she settles down and tries to let sleep overtake her. Suddenly, the loud, phantom clinking of falling gold coins echoes vividly and repeatedly through her increasingly restless mind. Sweating and completely wide awake, she sits up in frustration, realizing that staring at shiny coins all day has completely ruined her ability to fall asleep. Deciding she cannot just lie there in the dark, she quietly slips out of her massive bed and sneaks toward the door for a midnight stroll. Pulling her warm cardigan over her shoulders, she gently clicks the heavy bedroom door open and steps out into the quiet hallway. The very second she steps out, she instantly bumps into an equally surprised King Forst, causing them both to jump and yelp in absolute shock. Lord Forst opens his door to find a deeply flushed Flaffel standing there. She nervously stammers as he asks her what is wrong. Forst explains he was about to wait until morning because he could not bring himself to visit a lady's room at night. He gently notes that they did not have time to talk during the day. Suddenly intense, Forst leans in and demands to know where Flaffel was going at this late hour. With sparkling eyes, Flaffel eagerly explains she was just wide awake and could not sleep. Forst sweats drops and flatly agrees that seems to be the case. Apologizing, Forst warns her that even though the Jalhul Kingdom matter is settled, she should not wander alone at night. Since he is here with her now, he suggests they take a walk in the garden. Flaffel lights up with joy and asks if he is really sure. Flaffel cheers enthusiastically as Forst reminds her that wandering outside at this hour is normally forbidden. A bright full moon shines down on the quiet, leafy courtyard. Forst sincerely apologizes for putting her in danger and causing so much trouble with the recent incident. Walking hand in hand through the moonlit garden, he softly calls her name. Flaffel closes her eyes and reassures him there is nothing to apologize for since King Jalhol was the one targeting her. She smiles gently, simply glad that everyone is safe. Clenching his fist, Forst admits he wanted to punch Lord Jalhol for hurling insults. However, having Flaffel by his side helped him keep his cool. Blushing deeply, Flaffel expresses immense gratitude and says she stayed calm because both he and Aqua were there. Forst passionately declares that he cannot help getting worked up when it comes to her. A flashback reveals someone sternly warning him not to let their countries come to blows over this incident. Pulling Flaffel close among the roses, Forst begs her to never leave his side from now on. Leaning into his gentle touch, Flaffel happily agrees. She innocently asks if being together forever means they can wash each other in the bath. A completely flustered Forst frantically shoots down the idea, insisting they need a proper relationship first. Holding her close, Forst confesses that feeling this happy makes his entire life feel finally rewarded. Confused by his rejection, Flaffel thinks bathing together sounds proper and fun. She innocently decides to ask Aqua about it soon. Forst vows to protect her no matter what and give back the happiness she has given him, promising to stay together forever. He wants to see her live with a smile to make up for all her past pain. Pulling her into a tight embrace, he swears he will never let her go again. Blushing fiercely, Flaffel breathes out a happy confirmation. Snuggling into his chest, she thinks about how much she loves Lord Forst. She hopes they can spend their lives laughing and being together forever and ever. The full moon continues to shine brightly over the peaceful night sky. Realizing things have finally settled down, Forst mentions he needs to tell those guys he has reunited with Flafer. Flafer looks surprised as Forst clarifies he means they're mutual friends from the orphanage. He reminisces that it was not just him and his older brother living there, but several other children as well. Forst explains he can contact them to meet right away, having even invited them to the palace before. Flafer excitedly cheers that she wants to see everyone. Smiling at her enthusiasm, Forst confirms she can see them all and notes they are working hard to improve the country. Gazing at her with intense fondness, he sincerely states his desire for her to meet his companions. A view of a dense forest is shown as Forst reflects on how much they have been through to get this far. A flashback to Chapter 11 reveals a tiny, smiling Flafer running toward her big brother. Young Forst hugs the adorable little girl, remembering her as a special younger sister whose smile always brightened his spirits. One fateful day, unfamiliar adults in uniform arrived at the orphanage and forcefully grabbed the little girl. A desperate young Forst screams for them to wait and tries to stop them from taking her away. He is brutally kicked away by a soldier shouting to get out of the way, groaning in pain as the carriage rolls off. Left behind in the dust, the young boy stares in shock, wondering why this is happening. Tears stream down his bruised face as he curses his own powerlessness for failing to protect one little girl. Despite his tears, a fierce determination sparks within him as he vows never to give up as long as he lives. Clasping his hands together, he swears that he will definitely find her with his own hands. Sitting under a tree, young Forst suddenly notices a familiar covered wagon arriving. His eyes widen in shock as he recognizes it as the exact same carriage that took his younger sister away. Hope flares in his chest as he wonders if maybe she has finally come back. He silently sneaks up toward the carriage as uniform-clad soldiers stand around it. Peeking from the bushes, young Forst nervously watches as the men notice someone is missing. A man loudly claps his hands together, demanding the attention of the brats. The harsh man orders all the children out to the courtyard immediately because he has something important to say. Young Forst bravely marches up to the soldiers and asks if they are taking them to see their younger sister. Looking down at the boy, the guards casually realize he is talking about the girl they took away last time. A ruthless soldier sneers at the panicked children, telling the poor brats not to worry pointlessly because they will never live to see adulthood. An older child gasps in utter shock, revealing that the king took a liking to the little girl and intends to have her engaged to someone in the palace. Glaring down with merciless eyes, the uniformed guard coldly declares that the rest of the children are to be completely disposed of today. He brutally orders them not to bother resisting this done deal, explaining they have been commanded to haul the trash to the edge of the country and dump them. Two terrified little children are violently thrown into the unforgiving back of a large wooden wagon. The guard snarls with utter contempt, demanding the kids be grateful that they are personally loading them onto the carriage. The soldiers ruthlessly grab the sobbing orphans by their fragile clothes, mercilessly tossing them into the transport like worthless luggage. Young Forst fiercely struggles against a guard's iron grip, desperately demanding to be let go as he is hurled inside. The horse-drawn carriage rolls silently out into a desolate landscape, heavily escorted by mounted guards. Sitting helplessly in the moving wagon, Forst trembles in pure disbelief, frantically wondering what he is supposed to do. All around him, the younger, terrified children break down into loud, inconsolable sobbing. Clenching his tiny fists, he fiercely reassures himself that as long as his younger sister is alive, they will figure something out. Forst realizes he must keep it together for the sake of the others, fighting back his own overwhelming despair. He rationalizes that if she is becoming a fiancée at the palace, she surely will not be treated as roughly as they were. Sitting resolutely in the dark wagon, the boy vows to survive no matter what it takes and eventually get her back. Glaring ahead with incredibly hardened eyes, he determines there is only one crucial thing he needs to focus on right now. The guards mercilessly dump the weeping children out of the back of the wagon, cruelly mocking them as trash. As the carriage drives away, the guards laughably remind them they are being disposed of, leaving the crying kids begging for food in the middle of nowhere. A mounted guard sadistically tells the abandoned children to go eat dirt, warning them that strict checkpoints will block any attempt to return to the capital. The wagon completely disappears into the hazy distance, leaving the small orphans standing entirely alone in the vast, intimidating forest. Overwhelmed by sheer terror and total abandonment, the group of tiny children erupts into synchronized, agonizing wailing. Young Forst urgently yells at them to calm down, insisting that if they work together and refuse to give up, they can actually make it. A dark-haired boy tearfully snaps back, furiously asking what they are supposed to do since they have no choice but to die. The older, dark-haired boy crosses his arms defensively, clearly irritated by Forst's sudden, bossy leadership. The dark-haired boy points out that they are just children left alone in the wild, sarcastically questioning what they are supposed to do. Suddenly, Forst's eye widens in pure shock as a startling realization strikes his mind. Trusting his sharp instincts, Forst confidently declares that his mysterious premonitions are sensing something from a specific direction. He excitedly reflects that his premonitions previously just predicted weather or food, but now this incredible power might actually help them survive. Looking at the highly confused, crying children, Forst desperately wonders how he can effectively convince them to listen to him. His eyes light up brilliantly as he remembers playing princess and king with his younger sister, giving him a spectacular idea. Throwing his arms wide, Forst loudly commands everyone to calm themselves, instantly startling the panicked group into complete silence. Radiating fierce determination, he passionately promises that if they work together and hold on to hope, he is certain they will find a way out. The children stare at him in stunned, sweaty silence, completely thrown off by his highly dramatic, royal speech. The dark-haired boy immediately breaks the silence, angrily asking what good it does to suddenly act all high and mighty in a deadly situation. Undeterred, Forst clears his throat and boldly claims his premonition tells him there will be a rescue ship if they head a certain way. A vibrant ripple of hopeful murmurs spreads through the crying children as they realize his famous premonitions might actually save them. Clenching his fist, Forst passionately rallies them, promising that if they head that way together, what he believes will absolutely come true. The grand speech is suddenly interrupted by loud stomach growls as the children pitifully complain about being incredibly hungry. Pivoting smoothly, Forst uses his premonition to excitedly suggest they head into the forest where he feels they will undoubtedly find food. The dark-haired boy clicks his tongue, grudgingly admitting that while it pisses him off, he will listen just this once. Forst playfully teases the older boy by calling him Bossy Boots, which predictably prompts an angry demand to stop using weird names. The two boys simply stare at each other, an unspoken, resilient understanding passing between the newfound co-leaders. Working together effectively in the brush, Forst carefully directs the children, warning them away from dangerous mushrooms and pointing out safe edibles. They quickly gather an impressive, wildly colorful pile of perfectly safe berries, fruits, and mushrooms. The children gaze at the abundant food in awe, cheerfully declaring this is way better than the orphanage and praising Yokon for saving them. The dark-haired boy happily stuffs his face, begrudgingly expressing his immense gratitude while warning the wildly grinning Forst not to let it go to his head. A little girl excitedly speaks up, eagerly suggesting they give Yokon a proper name and officially make him their king. The fantastic idea catches on immediately, with the kids cheering that the new king can delightfully think of names for everyone else too, leaving Forst completely bewildered. The dark-haired boy smirks and agrees, noting that since they are no longer restricted by the strict orphanage, they can joyfully do whatever they want. Amidst the highly hopeful murmurs of the newly forged group, someone eagerly suggests the name Forst, officially christening the young visionary as their definitive leader. Offering a compromise if the current moniker is displeasing, one child promises to think of a different name for the other, having originally based the idea on the sprawling forest where his friend is destined to become their undisputed boss. Playfully interrupting the teasing about him being a bossy brat, the newly dubbed boy excitedly hangs on a second before gratefully accepting the name Forst as a truly magnificent title. Deeply touched that his companion went entirely out of his way to bestow such a cool name upon him, Forst resolves to reciprocate by inventing an equally proper and impressive name. Pondering deeply with his hand to his chin, Forst brainstorms aloud, testing out fragmentary syllables like gehol and ball in his desperate search for the perfect, cool-sounding fit. Turning back to face his expectant friend with newfound confidence, Forst excitedly proposes the name gehol to see how it resonates. Smirking with clear satisfaction at the sound of it, the boy notes that it is not bad at all, humorously expanding the title to Gehol the Bossy. Overjoyed that this marks his very first time naming someone, Forst watches warmly as Big Brother Gehol laughs uproariously, proudly and fully embracing his brand new identity. As the laughter briefly subsides, Gehol's affectionate thoughts momentarily drift toward the well-being of his own beloved younger sister. Staring thoughtfully ahead, he reflects on the profound, heavy responsibility of ensuring he gives his younger sister a proper, meaningful name as well. Suddenly breaking the quiet moment, the rest of the surrounding children eagerly crowd around Forst with sparkling eyes, excitedly begging Your Majesty to bestow new names upon them too. Taking his newfound royal duty incredibly seriously, Forst systematically points to the hopeful children sitting before him, thoughtfully dubbing them with unique names like Rafi, Fam, and Maddie. Eventually, the thoroughly exhausted group of newly named children collapses onto the ground, falling into a peaceful, collective slumber together beneath the vast, starry night sky. Watching over his peacefully sleeping friends, a tremendously relieved Forst feels a surge of gratitude that everyone now possesses the vital hope required to keep living. Clasping his hands in a quiet, desperate prayer, he reassuringly promises himself that as long as they all remain firmly united together, they can inevitably overcome whatever terrifying obstacles come next. Chapter 12 abruptly commences with the weary children resuming their arduous, punishing trek through the dense and unforgiving wilderness. Wiping a heavy sheen of sweat from his brow, an exhausted Forst desperately wonders just how many agonizing days they have been endlessly walking since that fateful moment. Glancing back at his struggling companions, Forst notes with deep, mounting concern that everyone is visibly exhausted and rapidly approaching their absolute physical breaking point. Despite the crushing, overwhelming fatigue dragging him down, he fiercely encourages himself that they must be close, feeling his mysterious, guiding premonition undeniably growing stronger by the minute. Turning to face the battered group with a sudden surge of renewed vigor, Forst excitedly announces that his premonition confidently dictates they are almost entirely out of the cursed forest. Rallying his weary, stumbling friends with a powerful shout, he passionately urges them all to give just one final, desperate push toward their ultimate freedom. Grasping each other's trembling hands and carrying the smallest toddlers on their backs, the resilient children summon their remaining, fractured strength and charge forward together toward the light. Bursting out into a brilliant, sunlit clearing, a triumphant Forst throws his arm forward and joyously shouts to everyone that they have finally discovered the exit. Before their widened eyes lies a breathtaking, sprawling landscape dominated by a magnificent, towering stone castle looming on the distant horizon. Staring ahead in absolute, paralyzed disbelief, the awestruck group stammers in unison, wondrously asking aloud if the magnificent, sprawling sight before them is truly a city. Hot tears of overwhelming relief stream down the girls' dirt-streaked faces as they eagerly crowd around their leader, passionately crying out their heartfelt thanks to Forst. Humbly and immediately waving off their immense praise, Forst insists that they only survived this ordeal because they all worked together, adamantly refusing to take the credit for himself. Gehol immediately steps up to intervene, firmly reminding a bewildered Forst that without his incredible premonition, the group would have unquestionably perished in the woods. Offering a deeply grateful, determined smile to his friend, Gehol extends his fist forward, warmly and resolutely declaring that their miraculous survival is entirely thanks to him. Without a single second of hesitation, the two young leaders fiercely meet their knuckles in a solid, unifying fist bump to permanently seal their unspoken brotherhood bond. Smiling brightly and breathlessly at one another, Forst and Gahel share a profound, quiet moment of triumphant camaraderie against the backdrop of their newfound freedom. Despite their current, euphoric joy, a lingering, icy anxiety remains firmly planted in their minds, as they know there is still absolutely no guarantee they will be safe once they finally enter the city limits. Suddenly, the entire group of children freezes in sheer, paralyzing shock as an imposing, elegant horse-drawn carriage dramatically approaches their vulnerable position on the dirt path. Trembling visibly with sudden, spiking apprehension, the children stare intently at the rapidly encroaching vehicle, nervously whispering to one another about who or what might be lurking inside. Forst's weary eyes widen in sheer confusion and mounting terror as the younger, highly vulnerable children squeak in fright and instinctively cower for protection behind his back. The heavy, ornate wooden wheels of the massive carriage loudly and ominously grind to a complete halt right on the rugged dirt path directly in front of the terrified orphans. Raw panic instantly ripples through the weary group as they terrifyingly realize the mysterious, wealthy carriage has deliberately stopped explicitly for them. The suffocating tension finally shatters as the heavy carriage door sharply clicks open, revealing a pristine, elegantly manicured shoe delicately stepping out into the harsh dirt. The chaotic narrative dramatically transitions into a serene, tranquil night sky, beautifully illuminated by a massive, glowing full moon and a flurry of gently drifting flower petals. Years into the peaceful future, a much older, distinguished Forst affectionately holds hands with a beautiful young woman as they stroll intimately through a lush, moonlit rose garden. The elegant young woman gazes up at him with deep, undisguised adoration, her large, sparkling eyes perfectly reflecting the peaceful, ambient moonlight. Quickly apologizing for his sudden distraction, an older Lord Forst gently admits to his companion that his mind had simply drifted to a profound, weighty memory from long ago. His mature, remarkably sorrowful eyes reflect the heavy, invisible weight of his past, harboring the dark memories of the desperate struggles he endured as a lost child. Squeezing his hand affectionately, the woman empathetically acknowledges how incredibly difficult his childhood was, prompting him to recall the harrowing story of how he first came to this country. He somberly and quietly recounts how their abandoned group miraculously survived the vast, deadly forest of the Kingdom of Harvest, only to accidentally and fatefully find themselves stranded in the Kingdom of Riverside. With a heavy, weary sigh, Forst confesses that, as completely naive children, they had utterly failed to realize the lethal gravity of illegally entering a neighboring nation without the proper official procedures. He vividly recalls the sheer, stammering confusion they felt back then, completely unaware that their desperate, innocent bid for survival was actually considered a highly punishable illegal border crossing. Gazing deeply into the garden's shadows, he ominously explains that if they had carelessly approached the town and been spotted by the strict military police, their young lives would have been in absolute, immediate danger. However, a soft, immensely grateful smile breaks across his hardened face as he reveals that the very first person they encountered mercifully took them in, hid them away, and ultimately saved their lives. Leaning in closely with a playful, enigmatic hum, Lord Forst gently asks his beloved companion who she thinks that mysterious, life-saving savior might have been. Looking upon her with immense, overflowing tenderness, he declares that he and everyone from the orphanage remain eternally and deeply grateful to that extraordinary person. The young woman curiously asks if the savior he mentioned is someone she has met before. Confirming her suspicion, Lord Forst nods and says that is exactly right. He softly explains that he cannot reveal much more than that, but he is entirely sure the person will eventually share their past with her directly. Gazing at her with gentle earnestness, Forst expresses his sincere hope that she will listen closely to what they have to say when that fateful time finally comes. Blinking in slight confusion, she smiles brightly up at the moon and promises that she absolutely will. The narrative beautifully transitions to a bright, sunlit morning showcasing a magnificent stone tower looming over a bustling cityscape. A cheerful young girl hums a happy, melodic tune to herself with a soft giggle. Someone abruptly calls out to Flafer to ask if she is ready, suddenly freezing mid-sentence in absolute awe. Unaware of the stunned silence, Flafer joyfully celebrates that today is finally the long-awaited day she gets to reunite with everyone at the orphanage. The young lord stares in wide-eyed, blushing shock at the stunning vision of Lady Flayfer sitting gracefully while her attendant brushes her long hair. Noticing his frozen state, the girls ask Lord Forst what is wrong, prompting him to quickly brush it off while internally marveling at how incredibly blessed he truly is. Holding up her hairbrush with immense pride, Aqua wipes some mock sweat from her brow and playfully declares her styling work to be an absolute masterpiece. Aqua affectionately explains that she gave it her absolute all to show everyone how much Lady Flayfer has beautifully grown, earning a warm, heartfelt thanks from her delighted friend. The beautifully dressed trio makes their way down the grand, sweeping staircase toward the manor's massive entrance hall. The heavy double doors click open as a uniformed attendant formally announces to His Majesty that he has finally brought the guests. Standing tall and radiating undeniable authority, a grown, handsome Gahul awaits them in his striking fur-lined coat. The atmosphere shifts to deep reverence as a dramatic, sweeping kneel is performed to honor the imposing ruler. Lord Forst respectfully lowers himself to one knee before the king, officially addressing his old friend as Your Majesty. The king's polished shoes step forward as Forst affectionately adds his true name, Gahul, to the formal greeting. Gently grasping his kneeling friend's arms to lift him up, Gahul warmly welcomes everyone and expresses his genuine joy that they came. Remaining perfectly poised, Forst formally declares that if His Majesty summons them, they shall dutifully hasten to his side at any time. Visibly flustered by the stiff formality, Gahul begs his old friend to stop talking like that because it is getting incredibly embarrassing for him. Forst stammers a quick apology before Gahul casually teases that he never reaches out unless he needs something, genuinely adding that it has been far too long. Defending his absence, Forst softly explains that he has had a lot going on himself, making Gahul raise an intrigued eyebrow. While Forst sheepishly admits he thought it would be rude to interrupt their busy schedules, a relaxed Gahul assures him he never needs to worry about such trivial stuff. Aqua giggles softly and chimes in that His Majesty diligently attends to his official duties every single day. Continuing her playful scolding, she warns Gahul not to cause any trouble for Lady Aqua, making the king nervously sweat and ask if she messed something up. The king's visible eye widens in sudden, striking realization as the conversation shifts toward the identities of his lovely guests. Gahul fondly notes that Aqua is the only princess who ultimately remained behind in their kingdom. Aqua nervously covers her mouth while a wide-eyed Flayfer watches the royal exchange with clear confusion. Utterly flabbergasted by the shocking revelation, Flayfer screams out in total disbelief while the king looks down at her. Trembling with sudden, world-shattering clarity, Flayfer stammers as she tries to process that her best friend Aqua is actually royalty. Staring with wide, completely horrified eyes, the young blonde desperately shouts out the word princess in sheer panic. The explosive, comical realization kicks off Chapter 13 with an absolute bang. Her head spinning with dizzying confusion, a completely overwhelmed Flayfer frantically wonders aloud if she just heard that correctly. While Forst panics at Flayfer's dramatic reaction, a smiling Gahul quickly pivots the conversation, excitedly asking the room if they remember who this specific girl is. Leaning in closely to inspect the trembling blonde, Gahul hums in confusion and admits he doesn't think he has ever met this noble daughter before. Forst steps forward to proudly announce that this beautiful young lady is actually Flayfer, causing Gahul to gasp in absolute, breathless shock. Smiling with profound warmth, Forst confirms that she is indeed the beloved younger sister who was tragically taken away from them back then. Squinting at her refined features, Gahul quietly agrees that he finally sees the subtle but undeniable family resemblance. Bursting with ecstatic energy, the king enthusiastically pumps his fists and praises Forst for miraculously finding her after all these years. Reintroducing himself to the timid girl, Gahul gently laughs that she was probably too small to remember him, playfully reminding her that he used to be called Mr. Bossy. Her eyes widening in sudden, terrifying recognition, Flayfer stutters the word bossy as a dark, hilarious memory begins to forcefully resurface. A blood-curdling, utterly dramatic scream of absolute horror violently erupts from inside the peaceful palace walls. Pointing an accusatory, shaking finger at the king, she shrieks that he was the terrible boy who always aggressively got in the way whenever she was with her older brother. As Gahul groans in defeat, she fiercely remembers that he is the exact same villain who wickedly snatched the precious bread right before she and her brother could eat it. Sweating profusely as she snarls about him stealing all the treasured grass she hoarded, Gahul desperately defends himself by claiming he absolutely does not remember any of that. Smiling brightly despite the chaotic accusations, an older friend sincerely thanks her, noting that talking to her has wonderfully brought back so many vivid memories of the orphanage. Feeling slightly guilty about the barrage, Flafer softly apologizes for everything, but is quickly reassured that they truly do not mind her energetic outburst. Looking down at her with fond amusement, someone warmly muses that she was always such a bossy little thing. Watching Gahul and Force smile together, Aqua happily reflects that despite his mean past, the king turned out incredibly well and maintains a beautiful bond with Lord Forst. The young princess absorbs the shocking revelation with quiet understanding, repeating her realization aloud as the weight of the moment settles. She closes her eyes with a serene, knowing smile as the truth finally takes root in her mind. Suddenly panicking, the flustered girls frantically backpedal and beg her to wait, realizing she has completely misunderstood their intentions. A confident young man interrupts the chaos, prompting the shocked girls to exclaim his name, Gaihar, while stammering about his sudden bossy demeanor. Completely unfazed by their volatile reactions, Gaihar simply tilts his head with a mild smirk and confirms that he meant exactly what he just stated. One of the girls completely loses her composure, flailing wildly in disbelief as she questions if she heard correctly that Aqua is actually a royal princess. Clearing her throat awkwardly, the dark-haired girl stares in sheer astonishment, utterly bewildered that her companion remained ignorant of this massive secret. Overwhelmed by the escalating situation, the blonde girl lets out a deep, defeated sigh as her eyes well up with nervous tears. She presses her lips together in a tight, anxious hum, struggling immensely to process the sudden influx of royal revelations. The dark-haired girl steps forward with genuine remorse, apologizing deeply to Lady Flafer for hiding the truth while hoping for a calmer moment to explain. Placing a hand earnestly over her heart, she bows her head in deep contrition, asking Flafer for forgiveness regarding her prolonged deception. She solemnly lists the very few individuals who know her true royal identity, including the king, the orphanage residents, and the lingering palace staff. With a heavy but resolute expression, the dark-haired girl officially introduces herself as Aqua Riverside, the third princess of the Riverside Kingdom. Flafer latches onto the ominous word, her eyes widening in confusion as Gaihar and his companions quietly listen to the unfolding tragedy. The solemn young men reveal the kingdom's grim reality, explaining that aside from Aqua, the majority of the royals and nobles cowardly fled the country and abandoned their people. As Flafer gasps in horror, Aqua declares her intent to expose the kingdom's dark truth, burdening Flafer with the responsibility of shouldering the nation's future alongside the king. Aqua recounts the grim history of Riverside, detailing how the prolonged absence of a Saintess caused the weather to turn and the crops to utterly fail. With the nation teetering perilously on the brink of mass starvation, they were forced into the desperate position of seeking foreign aid to keep their country alive. Her voice dripping with sorrow and disdain, Aqua reveals that her father, the former king, selfishly prioritized his own survival over his dying people during the catastrophic crisis. In a painful flashback, a much younger Aqua bravely confronts her father, warning him that the kingdom stands at a lethal crossroads where mass starvation is imminent. With desperate urgency in her youthful eyes, she pleads with the king to accept immediate neighboring aid, insisting that escaping the crisis must be their absolute top priority. The tyrannical king viciously shuts her down, mocking her youth while she continues to beg for a decision that would protect their vulnerable citizens. Reaching out into the echoing halls, the tiny princess desperately calls out to her retreating father's back. Without even turning around, the callous monarch dismisses the suffering masses as irrelevant, cruelly prioritizing his own comfortable life over taking on national debt. Left completely alone in the sprawling, empty corridor, the heartbroken child weeps softly and wonders why her father refuses to understand the gravity of the situation. Adding to her misery, her arrogant sisters snicker from the shadows, mocking Aqua for constantly defying their father and failing to act like a proper, passive lady. Trembling with righteous fury, Aqua questions the twisted logic of her royal siblings, refusing to believe that sitting idly by during a national crisis is the proper way to rule. Snapping back to the present, Aqua releases a heavy, exhausting sigh as the crushing weight of her traumatic past settles over her once more. Seeking a fleeting moment of solace from her oppressive life, she decides to step outside for a change of pace and admire the rare, unclouded sky. Her peaceful solitary walk is suddenly interrupted when a frantic voice urgently calls out her royal title. A grand horse-drawn carriage trundles down the dirt path leading away from the imposing castle walls, its wooden wheels clattering against the earth. Peering out the window, Aqua urgently commands the driver to stop the carriage after spotting a group of severely tattered children wandering the road. 4 filthy, wide-eyed orphans huddle together in terror, their exhausted faces reflecting the brutal harshness of a world that has completely discarded them. Stepping gracefully down from the carriage, the young princess approaches the frightened group and gently asks what they are doing in such a desolate place. Crouching down to their eye level to appear less intimidating, she softly inquires about their origins. Flashing a warm, reassuring smile, Aqua promises the trembling children that they are perfectly safe and have absolutely no reason to be frightened. A surprisingly polite boy introduces himself as Forced, the representative of the group, explaining that they hail from an orphanage in the Harvest Kingdom's capital. Matching his respectful tone, she formally introduces herself to the astounded boy as Aqua Riverside, the 3rd princess of the realm. While the orphans gasp in absolute awe at meeting royalty, Aqua humbly admits with a sad smile that she is a princess in name only. Forced grimly confesses that they were marked for disposal and thrown away, prompting a horrified Aqua to realize they marched all the way here through the treacherous forest. Her heart shattering at their cruel fate, Aqua clenches her fists and vows internally that she absolutely cannot look the other way. The horrifying phrase regarding their disposal echoes ominously in her mind, cementing her fiery determination to intervene. Deeply disturbed by the implications, she ponders the horrific events unfolding in the neighboring nation, realizing the rumors of the Harvest King's tyranny were dreadfully true. Her mind firmly made up, Aqua looks the orphans in the eyes and boldly declares that she is taking every single one of them back to her palace. The exhausted children and her own carriage driver stare at the young princess in absolute, stunned disbelief. Staring defiantly toward the horizon, Aqua reasons that since her father will despise her regardless of her actions, she might as well use her royal authority to save lives. A heartwarming montage unfolds at the palace, showing the previously doomed orphans receiving warm baths, clean clothing and plenty of nourishing food under Aqua's care. Watching the children finally smile in safety, Aqua firmly reassures herself that her rebellious act of compassion was absolutely the right choice. She harbors a quiet, beautiful hope that the radical kindness she has shown to these discarded souls will eventually ripple out and save someone else in the future. Her solitary reflection in the sunlit corridor is joyfully broken when young Forced comes sprinting toward her, calling out her name with deep gratitude. Aqua warmly greets Forced as he approaches. Observing his comfortable demeanor, Aqua notes that he seems quite used to palace life already. Forced smiles and agrees, attributing his easy adjustment to everyone's kindness. He admits that he initially thought they weren't welcome at the palace, but everyone has been incredibly kind lately. Eager to show his appreciation, Forced expresses his deep gratitude to help with simple palace tasks. He insists that the orphans couldn't just let the staff take care of them for nothing. Looking up at the princess with sincere eyes, Forced thanks her deeply for speaking up for him. Flashing a charming smile, Aqua lightly brushes off the praise by joking that her actions were all carefully calculated. Forced reiterates how much her help means to him, especially the incredible opportunity to finally study. Aqua confidently assures Forced that his valuable premonitions must not go to waste, predicting he will eventually use his gifts for the kingdom's benefit. A flashback triggers in Aqua's mind, echoing her father's boisterous laughter as he praises Forced's truly remarkable ability despite the outward approval. A lingering sense of suspicion clouds Aqua's thoughts. Aqua quietly wonders why her hypercritical father, who always finds fault with her, is suddenly so eagerly supportive of funding Forced's fine education. Meanwhile, the king lounges comfortably on a plush sofa, eagerly confirming with his advisors that a secret plan is proceeding smoothly. Bursting into arrogant laughter, the monarch celebrates their excellent progress, noting that their scheme won't take long to complete at this rapid rate. Completely dismissing any potential backlash, the king orders his loyal subordinate to completely ignore anyone who dares to oppose their agenda. The king's expression darkens into a sharp, calculating scowl as a new thought enters his treacherous mind. Shifting his focus to the young prodigy, the king sinisterly gloats that they have truly found themselves a remarkable treasure in Forced. The king tightens his grip in eager anticipation, concluding that the boy's sharp intuition makes him a special existence on par with a Saintess. Acknowledging that Aqua went out of her way to bring the orphan in, the ruthless king plots to make full, exploitative use of her as well. Several years pass, and an older Forced stands confidently among officials, intelligently advising them to use specific waterways to counter impending disasters. Highly valued for his uncanny power of premonition, The brilliant young man has now been fully entrusted with critical governmental affairs under the king's direct command. Grateful officials shower Forst with praise, admitting that the country can no longer function without him after his flawless judgment saved them during a recent heavy rain. Aqua enters the busy study area, warmly noting that the young prodigy seems incredibly occupied with his mounting duties. Aqua playfully reveals that the commoners are calling him a once-in-a-generation genius and a national hero, leaving Forst completely bewildered. She smiles brightly and assures the humble boy that his incredible exploits have officially become the main talk of the common folk. While Aqua lists grand rumors about him saving people from landslides and guiding the lost, a flustered Forst insists he has never heard such wildly exaggerated tales. Changing the subject, Aqua gently asks Forst for any updates regarding the ongoing search for his missing younger sister. Looking at the somber boy, Aqua reassuringly notes that his high-ranking position at the palace might eventually provide a crucial clue to finding her. Offering her unwavering support, Aqua warmly encourages Forst to keep at his search, promising that she is always rooting for him. Walking away, Aqua falls into deep thought, wondering why her appearance-obsessed father isn't trying to suppress the loud public rumors surrounding an orphan working at the palace. Her intuition flares with dark suspicion as she realizes something is terribly wrong, especially since Forst himself is completely ignorant of his own rising fame. Down in the bustling streets, excited citizens loudly share news of an impending, major palace announcement regarding the very future of their nation. The grand, imposing exterior of the royal palace stands tall against the sky as the kingdom waits in breathless anticipation. Standing nervously in the grand hall alongside Forst, Aqua wonders what her father is about to declare without any prior warning. The king and queen finally make their grand, intimidating entrance, their expressions unreadable as they face the gathered assembly. Gripping her dress in rising anxiety, Aqua stares up at her approaching father with intense trepidation. The king pauses before his wary daughter, condescendingly telling her not to be so guarded since he brings supposedly good news for the entire kingdom. Issuing crisp, commanding orders, the monarch directs Aqua to move aside while shockingly demanding that Forst come stand right by his side. With a sharp pivot of his polished boot, the king steps boldly toward the grand balcony, ushering the bewildered young prodigy along with him. Looking down at the massive sea of expectant faces, the king projects his booming voice to thank everyone for gathering on such short notice. He declares his grand intention to introduce a very specific individual, teasing the roaring crowd that they may already be familiar with this person's legendary exploits. A ripple of eager confusion sweeps through the massive crowd as the citizens eagerly wait to see the face behind the growing rumors. Placing a firm, possessing hand on the boy's slender shoulder, the grinning king loudly introduces the hero to the nation as Forst Riverside. The king drops a massive, fabricated bombshell, falsely claiming that Forst has Riverside royal blood despite living far away for certain secret reasons. Ignoring Forst's sheer, panicked disbelief, the king praises the exceptionally capable boy and loudly proclaims that he has officially joined the royal family as of today. The crowd erupts into absolute frenzy as the king credits Forst with single-handedly providing the brilliant solutions to most of the dire problems they've faced in recent years. Reaching the terrifying climax of his speech, the ruthless monarch shockingly declares that Forst Riverside shall be immediately appointed as the kingdom's next king. Utterly paralyzed by the horrific weight of the sudden decree, the young prodigy silently screams in his mind, completely incapable of processing the king's insane words. Playing the part of a tragic martyr, the cunning king dramatically admits to being an inadequate ruler while gleefully preparing to force all royal responsibilities onto the trapped boy's shoulders. The cowardly monarch finally reveals his true, selfish escape plan, announcing that he will abandon the struggling country for foreign lands under the guise of securing external relief supplies. Shedding entirely fake, hypocritical tears in the pouring rain, the king claims that leaving his beloved homeland deeply pains him, solidifying his ultimate betrayal of his people. The selfish king declares they will overcome the crisis together, cowardly entrusting the nation's future to the youth while seeking his own escape in distant lands. Aqua aggressively throws open the doors and confronts the stunned boy, shouting Lord Forst's name in pure desperation. Trembling with fury, she accuses her father of intentionally spreading the wild rumors about Lord Forst to set him up. She realizes the sinister truth, accusing the king of manipulating public opinion to crown Forst solely so he could flee to safety himself. The towering monarch stares coldly down at his furious daughter, his shadowed expression confirming her darkest suspicions without a single word. Acknowledging his trap, The king cruelly gloats that Forced has nowhere left to escape since the succession was declared in front of a massive crowd. Turning his back on the trapped boy, the tyrant formally seals his fate by declaring him the new king of the crumbling country. Shifting his attention back to Aqua, the king offers her a life of comfort and luxury if she agrees to behave like a proper, obedient princess. He issues a harsh ultimatum, demanding to know if Aqua will accompany him to safety or foolishly stay behind. With tears streaming down her fierce face, Aqua violently slaps her father's hand away in a powerful display of absolute defiance. Glaring with unwavering resolve, she firmly refuses his cowardly offer and declines the escape. The callous king simply lowers his eyes and accepts her decision, feigning a fleeting sense of disappointment over her stubbornness. Muttering that it is a shame, the monarch turns his back on his weeping daughter and walks away through the heavy doors. Left behind, Aqua breaks down in tears and profusely apologizes to Forced for her father's monstrous betrayal. Sobbing heavily, she laments that she only wanted to improve the country and questions why her family could never understand each other. As Aqua cries uncontrollably, a shocked Forced steps forward with a hardened gaze and boldly declares that he will accept the throne. Clenching his fists with fiery determination, the young boy vows to become the king and prove his worth to everyone. Forced turns to the weeping princess with a gentle smile, confidently reassuring her that they will somehow manage to survive this crisis. Clutching his chest, he admits he has a strong premonition about their success, prompting Aqua to look at him with renewed hope. Inspired by his incredible bravery, Aqua wipes her tears and dramatically renounces her royal title as a princess. While Forced panics at her sudden declaration, Aqua explains that she was never suited for royalty and wants to become someone who actively supports hardworking people. Smiling brightly through her lingering tears, the former princess enthusiastically vows to become a maid so she can personally support the new king. The scene fades to a beautifully clear sky, symbolizing the peaceful passage of time and the dawn of a new era for the resilient kingdom. Aqua notes that her exiled father currently sends support supplies and money from his new country of residence twice a year. She confesses that despite his cowardly abandonment, seeing the relief supplies constantly reminds her that the king hasn't entirely forgotten their homeland. Staring out thoughtfully, she quietly muses that her father hasn't completely abandoned them, finding a small sliver of comfort in his distant gestures. A gentle hand suddenly grasps hers, snapping her out of her melancholic thoughts as a familiar voice calls her name. Flafer leans in close and softly acknowledges the immense hardships Aqua must have endured throughout the chaotic transition. Startling the former princess, Flafer correctly deduces that Aqua has been pushing herself incredibly hard ever since she was painfully separated from her real family. Flafer softly explains that she reached out because she suspected Aqua was secretly feeling just as lonely as she once did. Lowering her eyes sadly, Flafer recounts her own painful experience of being separated from her orphanage family, sharing how deeply agonizing that isolation felt. Aqua remembers standing with her parents and sisters, silently agreeing with Flafer's sentiment that despite their major flaws, they were still her family. Overwhelmed by the poignant memory and Flafer's deep empathy, a single tear rolls down Aqua's cheek as she absorbs the comforting words. Gripping Flafer's hands tightly, a beaming Aqua tearfully declares that she is no longer lonely because she is surrounded by the people she truly loves. Looking toward the future with a hopeful smile, Aqua quietly wishes for the day when she might finally reunite with her estranged family.